Morning, everyone. I think we'll wait a few minutes for make sure everybody gets logged on. So, okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 4th STAC meeting. And welcome to our new Vice Chair, Kristen Stevens from Larimer County. We'll start off with our roll call. Have Aaron call the roll.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Let's start with Central Front Range.
I believe they were going to be absent today.
That's right. Eastern,
I'm here.
Grand Valley, and Pierre.
Dana Berthig, Grand Valley MPO.
Good morning, Rachel Peterson.
Denver.
Good morning, Emily Bear with Dr. Cog, representing Dr. Cog. And
Yep, sorry, Todd Cottrell, Program Manager with Dr. Cog, filling in for Jacob Rieger.
Gunnison Valley.
Sue Hansen, Gunnison Valley TPR.
Michelle Nauer, Gunnison Valley TPR.
Intermountain.
Tom Galzarowski, Intermountain TPR.
North Front Range NPR.
Hi, Kristen Stevens, North Front Range MPO.
Bill Jenkins, NFR MPO.
Becky Carrasco, North Front Range MPO.
Northwest TPR.
Jennifer O'Hara, Northwest TPR.
We couldn't hear you, Brian. I speak NPO.
Holly Williams, Pikes Peak, and looks like it's just me so far.
Josh Squires, Transportation Planner, PPACG.
Oh, hi, Josh.
Hi, Holly.
Bubba.
Good morning, Eva Cosleon, MPO Manager.
Good morning, Wendy Pettit, Pueblo County.
And Louise Valley.
Good morning, Vern Hersink.
South Central.
Mitchell Wardell, South Central TPR.
Southeast.
Stephanie Gonzalez, Southeast.
Southern Youth.
Sorry, good morning, Mandy Brown, Southern U.
Southwest.
Heather Alvarez, Southwest TPR.
And Shack Power, Southwest TPR.
Upper Front Range. Ute Mountain. Oh, Mr. Bear, you have a form.
Yeah. All righty. So we'll move on to approval of the May meeting minutes. They were presented in email. Would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved. Vern Hersink, San Luis Valley TPR.
Second.
Emily, thank you. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? See none. Is there anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes? Okay, seeing no objections, minutes will stand approved as presented. Okay, up next is our Transportation Commission report. Our May meeting was actually rather short. We had the 10-year plan workshop and the final adoption of it, which it was approved by the commission in the regular meeting. They had a workshop on Policy Directive 1601 to the commission, just outlining what that policy oversees as far as the interchanges, and that process was working its way through for revisions to that policy directive. So hopefully we'll be hearing some updates on that to STAC as that moves forward also. And then there was a update on some of the other rules that they're looking at updating, the chain law and passenger vehicle traction law requirements. Since there's legislation on that. There was one on use of waste tires for noise mitigation. Actually looking to abandon that one, or they did vote, I believe, to remove that one since it's never been used after it was put into legislation. And then state highway utility accommodation codes. So, and then they had an update on the wildfire mitigation project and how that's moving along. That is trying to help mitigate wildfire danger along the state highways and help create those fire breaks if a fire would break out. So other than that, it was a really light meeting. They had a appreciation for the 10-year plan completion, reception for that after the meeting on Wednesday. It was great work from all the team members, DTD, and all the work through the planning process to get that finally finished before we start the new plan. So that's about it. Any questions for me on commission? Not seeing any. We'll move on. Transit and Rail Advisory Committee. Is Ann on?
I'm here.
There you are. Thank you. I'll let you give the update.
Great. I'll give a quick update. The track meeting was last Thursday. During the meeting, Heather Pickering-Hilger shared the draft final report for the statewide transit pass that will be presented to the state legislature on July 1. OIM DTR is taking public comments through June 12 on the report. And so we can share the link to that after I speak if you're interested. And then Craig Seacrest provided updates on the Clean Transit Enterprise. The CTE board approved its funding formula for FY 27, and that's about $80 million for the next year, for that fiscal year that they'll be drawing down for the fee. And I wanted to mention that the track is really thankful for this pot of funding and the way it's being administrated. It's become a really important funding solution for transit agencies in the state of Colorado. Just to give you a little perspective, the 5311 formula grants for rural areas program has about $14 million a year in it. So you can see where that CTE funding is super important to transit agencies in our state, helping us maintain a state of good repair with vehicles. But more than that, its focus is really on expansion. So that's a really nice opportunity for our state. And then, like I said, we have a 5311 technical working group that's looking at that formula funding and what the formula within our state should look like. And the nice part is that they're integrating CTE and the impacts of that funding as well. And then Max Sullivan provided updates on the Joint Service Rail program. The negotiations are ongoing between Colorado and Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. They're working on the fiscal plan. They hope to finish their access agreement in mid-June. And then Joan Lyons provided updates on the Front Range passenger rail station planning. Fort Collins and Loveland are playing a little catch up with their station studies, and she also presented on Mountain Rail and its proposed stations, as well as the West Metro Station, which is currently going through extensive planning and engagement right now. So additional work is being done at various stages on the other stations. So that's the update from the track meeting. Any questions?
Not seeing any raised hands. So, yeah,
Thank you.
You highlighted the 5311 and that funding for the capital is a concern for especially rural areas to make sure that they can keep their buses updated and not get too much diverted into just operating, which then makes it hard to replace buses. So
yeah, and I think they noted during the meeting that most of that 5311, if not all of it, that funding right now is being put towards operating and admin. And so not much is being set aside, if any, for capital. And so that's a challenge with local agencies to maintain that state of good repair. So, but faster funding has helped with that as well. So, and 5339 federal funding can help, but it's not a statewide solution currently. Tricky. The funding is tricky.
Yes, it is. That's always keeping everything operating is important.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Ann, for the update. Up next is the Freight Advisory. They have not met, so there's nothing new from the Freight Advisory Committee this month. I believe they're meeting next in July, so it'll be in August will be the next update. Okay. TPR representative reports. Central Front Range is not here. Grand Valley.
Okay, sorry about that. So we have a couple things going on to report. One of the things is our board did approve free fare for August. So even though there's not the statewide program, we decided that was a valuable service. So we'll be doing free fare in August for Grand Valley Transit. Also, we had a student pass program that was free rides for students that was funded by TANF funds. Essentially due to kind of budget cuts, that is not being funded by TANF funds anymore, but our board also voted to approve that as well. So those were some kind of positive wins for transit here in the Grand Valley. Another thing that's kind of a program we've had for a couple of years is the bus stop mural program. And so we've gotten some arts funding to do murals at bus stops. And so we were awarded for 3 more murals and did a call for artists and have selected those murals. So I think we now have 3 out there and we'll have 6 soon. So that's also a kind of cool combination of transportation and the arts. And then we had a kind of special board meeting late in May to do another TIP amendment and then also to do a letter of support for a SS4A grant that the city of Grand Junction is applying for. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Greater Denver.
Good morning. So I missed the May STAC meeting because I was on a peer exchange trip with Dr. Cog to Seattle. And while we were out there, we got to, experience their transit systems, their trains, the floating bridge. It was a really great trip, and we got to connect with other local elected leaders, including county commissioners and mayors and city council members, and that, and then also their regional COG staff members, and we learned about their public-private partnerships and how they've leveraged state and federal funding and regional transportation plans to really do some innovative and really amazing, to implement these amazing transit plans, including buses and trains. And it was a really great trip. It was jam-packed. But also, Grand Valley, the report on art, there's a real emphasis in Seattle on funding art projects. 1% of their state budget goes to art, and a percentage of each city's budget goes to art, and then a percentage of their transportation planning goes to art. And it sounds a little bit frivolous or silly, but what that actually translated to is really bringing a lot of dignity to transit, and it became just a community, just something that everyone is really proud of. The service is really reliable and safe and something you want to use. And so I applaud Grand Valley for their investment in transportation and art. I think that's an important intersection that should be part of our considerations as we are at these tables. It was impressive how that really brought a lot of cultural identity. And anyway, I could go on and on. But they had some really innovative thinking around how to address problems and leveraging those public-private partnerships. And then there's a big emphasis on relationships and collaboration in Seattle among the different counties and among the different government entities. And so that was really compelling and inspiring. And I hope to bring more of that to these tables, to our relationships. At our May 20th meeting, Dr. Cog approved several things: the 26-29 Transportation Improvement Program policy amendments. We approved the Economic Development District boundaries, including, and then we also approved the fiscal year 26-27 budget. And we received an informational briefing on Infrastructure Investment and Job Act's Regional Grants Navigation Program and the final report on that. And we also received an informational briefing on the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation's Interstate 70 Mountain Corridor Impact Study. And we received an update from staff on Bike to Work Day, which is coming up, and then a wrap up of the state legislative issues. That's what's going on with Dr. Cog.
Okay. Thank you. Gunnison Valley.
Mr. Chair, we have no new updates. Thank you. We have our next meeting on July 30th.
Okay, thank you. Intermountain.
Good morning. No new updates from Intermountain. We have our next meeting on July 17th.
Okay. Thank you. North Front Range.
Yes, so a few things to report. At our May 7th Planning Council meeting, we adopted the 2025 Active Transportation Plan as well as our May TIP amendment. At that same meeting, we received a presentation on the Northern Colorado labor market profile, and we had presenters on this from the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce, the City of Fort Collins, Larimer County, and Upstate Colorado. Some of you may have heard that we are holding an ozone conference in Larimer County at the end of October, and this will be co-hosted by the North Front Range MPO and the Pikes Peak area council governments with funding from the Air Quality Enterprise, and we are accepting abstract submissions through June 23rd. And we had an open house on those abstracts, but if people are interested in either attending or want more information about the ozone conference that we'll be holding, please contact me or our executive director, Elizabeth Relford. We're happy to have everybody here who's in a non-attainment ozone area to participate with us. And then finally on Saturday, June 13th, so coming up, our long anticipated remaining connecting segment of the Poudre River Trail will officially open. So that connects even north of Fort Collins all the way into Greeley. And the Poudre River Trail celebration will be held at Timnath Community Park from 10 to 1 with an opening ceremony at 9 a.m. And the trail has been 50 years in the making, so we are very excited to open it. And it'll be a 45-mile regional trail. It runs from Bellevue, which is just north of Fort Collins, northwest of Fort Collins, to Greeley along the Poudre River. So we're excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Northwest. We cannot hear you.
How about now?
Now we can.
Excellent. Okay. Hi everybody, Brian Cirkvenik. Not a lot to report. Our next Northwest TPR meeting is currently scheduled for July 9th, but I didn't know if the STAC meeting is moving to that day or if it's going to be on July 2nd or not. So I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, we're actually probably just canceling July STAC meeting is what we're looking at for now. So.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see the other updates. We're moving forward with CDOT team regarding the safety improvement project on Highway 40 through Fraser. We were going to do a call for MMOF projects, but we put that on hold just to wait to confirm available funding. And then locally here, we had our ribbon cutting for the Fraser Bike Park last weekend. So we invite all of you up to Fraser to check it out. Today is the last day of school, so we expect it to be covered in kids with bikes starting tomorrow. Thanks much.
Thank you. Pikes Peak.
Yes, we did not do much. Our projects are doing okay. We had adopted our transportation improvement plan for 2027 to 31. Our mayors of our community did bring forward a human trafficking initiative, specifically discussing how buses and how to spot human trafficking on transportation buses or the RTD and those kind of things. And so they're pushing forward that. And then all of our projects are going okay. We're looking forward to that I-25 and Fillmore Garden of the Gods ready to open up and traffic to be able to move through there. So thank you.
Thank you. Pueblo area.
Good morning. So didn't have too much to go over our last meeting, but we did hear an update from the Exit 108 work. CDOT and stakeholders are working really well together and designing a box culvert and a rest area over the north side of our community. We're also still getting feedback for our bicycle and pedestrian master plan update, and that'll close July 27th to get public feedback. And then we also submitted our draft Transportation Improvement Program for 27 to 30 for public comment, and hopefully we'll get that adopted next month. That's it.
Thank you. San Luis Valley.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. We met on May 28th. It was mostly an informational meeting with updates and reports from everybody, so pretty light agenda, and we meet again on August 27th. End of report.
South Central.
Good morning. We haven't had a meeting since the last time we updated. At our last meeting, we did discuss a Trinidad Multimodal Center and Walsenburg Multimodal Center with all the talks of Front Range Passenger Rail. Our next meeting will be July 23rd, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you. Southeast.
Yes, we have not had a meeting as well since our last update. Ours is set for July 22nd. Our Thriving Community Program has been pretty successful, and the region has submitted an application to State Street Federal for a regional safety action plan. I think that's all we have to report.
Thank you. Southern Ute.
Good morning. We don't have anything to report today.
Okay. Thank you. Southwest.
Good morning. We don't have anything to report today, and our next meeting is in August.
Okay. Upper Front Range. Did anybody join?
I actually serve on the Upper Front Range, so if there's nobody here, I'll just say we haven't had a meeting since the last, STAC meeting, and we will be meeting actually this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Ute Mountain. Did anybody join? I don't see anybody. For Eastern, we're meeting on Monday. One of our big concerns recently from constituents is our Highway 385 from Burlington down to Cheyenne Wells. With the wind farm construction and those issues, they made comments at the commission meeting, just asking for help to maintain and keep that road functional with that heavy traffic that's on there. It's just fallen apart due to the low drivability life that's left on that road. It's to that point that the heavy freight traffic is just destroying it. So that's a major issue for our region, is just trying to maintain all these corridors that connect our communities and connect the state to the rest of the country that supplies the Front Range and all those, and trying to figure out how to get these addressed before they all start falling apart, like that 385 corridor is on us. So that's our big concerns, and we'll, I'm sure, be addressing it at our meeting Monday, in addition to MMOF funding, cutbacks and those things. So federal highways, did we have anybody on from Federal Highway? Did not see. So, okay. How about Federal Transit?
Hi, Emma Belmont is on from Federal Transit, but I don't have any updates today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that concludes our representative updates. We'll move on to our legislative report with Emily Hadaway and Jamie Grimm. So start with Emily if she's on.
Yes, I'm on. Thank you, Chair. Yes, good to see you all. Session wrapped up last month, as I'm sure everyone is tracking. I think overall it was a successful session. We ended up in a good place on a lot of bills, and I was proud of the collaboration we were able to reach with some of the legislation that was introduced, including HB 26-1318, traffic safety near schools, SB 26-141, wildlife collision prevention. There's a few bills that we just were able to get some good amendments and to reach common ground. Those two bills I mentioned have been signed by the governor. HB 26-141, the Wildlife Collision Prevention Bill, will be probably one of the bills with the heaviest lift this year. There's an associated fee in that bill that we'll have to begin collecting. Well, DMV collects it, but we'll have to begin administrating and determining a lot of different due outs from that bill, but excited to see that that one has passed and has been signed. Of course, we did not end up pursuing bus staying legislation, but we are continuing those discussions. And I think we had a lot of really great conversations with stakeholders throughout that process as we were considering that. So I'm interested to see how those conversations progress over the next few months as well. Let's see, I would say, one of the one exceptions to the rule of most things working out okay was the MMOF cuts. Of course, were difficult, and we are continuing to figure out how to reconcile those ongoing cuts for the next 3 years. That was definitely an unfavorable outcome that we would have liked to see a different outcome on, but it has been a very tough budget year, again, just like it was last year. Our 2 agency bills passed and have been signed: Transportation Statutory Cleanup, HB 26-1076, and HB 26-1237, Transportation Safety Modifications. I believe Statutory Cleanup is probably getting signed today. Likely that one has not officially been signed, but it's on the docket to be signed. Reporting after fatal car crash was another bill that we championed that wasn't necessarily a agency bill, but it did stem from a recommendation from the DUI task force, and so we were glad to see that one pass as well. Changes to automated vehicle identification system usage is one of the bills that was in the process, kind of down to the wire. That was signed, I believe, yesterday. That makes some updates to the speed camera statute. So once that goes into effect, we will be able to fix the weird way that the statute had been written before, which is currently preventing us from issuing civil penalties to high-speed violators in our speed corridors. So I'm glad to see that that is going to be fixed. And then, of course, the big other bill that was down to the wire was HB 26-1430, Transportation Funding Adjustments. I know I've spoken about that bill in the past. The original version of the bill responded to Initiative 175 and contemplated what budget balancing would look like if that were to take effect on January 1st. So that is still the bulk of the bill that was passed, but there were a few other provisions that were added towards the end of session. One is the creation of the new road enterprise. The road enterprise is funded from existing fees on oversized, overweight vehicles that are now being moved to a new enterprise. Really to think through what an enterprise could look like that is specifically focused on pavement and asset management. Hopefully that enterprise could grow in the future and be something bigger, but beginning to start that process and have a structure in place to direct new fees or look at other options for creative strategies for funding asset management, I think is a very worthy goal. So glad to see that that was set up at the end. And so we're beginning to think through those administrative steps. There was also an addition to the bill, which creates a transportation funding working group. The transportation funding working group will only convene if the proponents of Initiative 175 pull the ballot measure. So if they have it until June 15th to do that. If they continue to pursue the ballot measure, the transportation funding group will not meet. If the measure is pulled, then 9 members will be appointed to the working group to think through other funding strategies for pavement and asset management and maintenance. Those 9 members are appointed from a variety of different groups, so are appointed by the governor, the speaker, the president, and both minority leaders. And then each each of the members have to represent a different constituency. So we should know soon whether that the transportation funding working group will be meeting. It is directed by statute to be overseen by an independent neutral facilitator. So while it's under the CDOT statute and CDOT would be supporting administratively, it really would be a neutral facilitator who we would be hiring that would be overseeing and running the working group. So that will have some more developments in the next few weeks, and we'll see how that pans out. And then just looking towards the interim, there is no TLRC, so that will be an interesting change this summer that has its pros and cons. Typically, the Transportation Legislative Review Committee is a really great opportunity to interface with legislators and make sure that they understand how CDOT operates and get the opportunity to ask their questions to us. So that is something that we'll miss out on. But at the same time, it is also an extensive workload every summer to prepare for multiple TLRC meetings. So I think our staff will get some time back on that too. So if there are any questions on those bills, happy to answer them. And of course, any other bills too. But thanks for all your time this year, and likely won't have extensive updates for the next few months.
Okay. Thank you, Emily, for all your work. Are there any questions for her? Kristen?
Yeah, thank you. Emily, since that group's not meeting the TLRC, is that what they're called? TLRC? Is there a way to get them? Like, I mean, will you still be getting maybe some of the members of the transportation committee some information, like one-pagers or something? I think it's just helpful to kind of make sure that they're still in the loop. So I don't know if there are any plans to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good
question. Not that I want to make work for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there is a long slate of reports that are due to the TLRC every year that CDOT does, written reports. And so we still will be submitting those reports, whether or not we're actually giving a slide presentation on them. So we'll be submitting those. And then I am starting to think about, what are maybe some projects that are out in the field where we can engage the transportation committee, bring them out to see projects in their district and have those conversations. Because really one of the helpful things that has also gone away in the past year was the TLRC met last summer, but the field trip that they typically do was eliminated due to budget constraints. And so that field trip was really a great opportunity to get them out to see the projects, explain how things work. And I think that the interim is a really good time to try and replicate some of that. Even if we don't do a full field trip, at least try and get people out to see projects on the ground.
Will you, is there a way to engage like those of us who are in some of those areas in those districts to like maybe, come along or at least know when that's happening so we can kind of, also kind of promote those projects and be a part of that? I mean, if there's a way to do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Tom, question.
Thank you. Emily, I was trying to capture notes regarding the road enterprise information, and I ask you to forgive my ignorance as I'm new to STAC, but that was interesting to me, and I wanted to be able to share some info out with our TPR members. Are you able to help get me some complete and accurate information, more so than my notes that I could use?
Yes, absolutely. I have been meaning to make a fact sheet on the road enterprise and kind of speak to it because it is a complicated concept, just in the sense that it's sort of creating something that could grow to be something else in the future. And so at this time, it's in no way a new revenue boon, but it's a new structure. And so I'm happy to put some of those talking points in a document to share around.
Yeah, I think a fact sheet would be great. So look forward to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. That would be good. Help us educate our TPRs. So, okay. Anything else for Emily? Okay. Is Jamie on? Any federal update?
Everybody? Oh, I don't have my camera on.
There she is.
Hello, you guys are killing me. Give longer updates for your TPR updates.
Yeah, we're running quick today.
You're running quick. Good morning, everybody. So I hope nobody has been making bets on the prediction markets about surface transportation reauthorization because based on what I've been telling you, because you probably would have lost money. So we did get a surface transportation reauthorization bill from the House. Excuse me. Let me clarify. We got it from the committee. We have not gotten it from the House. We are in like mile 2 of a surface transportation reauthorization marathon. But mile 2 is pretty significant because I honestly wasn't sure we'd get off the starting line. So, want to do a quick overview of what is in the bill and then talk a little bit about next steps. So the bill was introduced days are going to get, it was passed through the House on May 21st. So the language was introduced the Sunday before, the language was released the Sunday before they had their committee markup on May 21st. So like whatever day that ends up being. And then the language was introduced on like Monday or Tuesday. So this has been a sprint. The bill overall is very bipartisan. It is very in line with what we were anticipating. The funding level probably a little bit higher, honestly, than I thought we'd get. We're not going to get an IIJA. It would be lovely if we got another IIJA, but the political will just isn't there for that kind of, we'll call it second in a generation funding. They were calling it once in a generation, might as well make it second, So, high level, we're looking at a $580 billion authorization level over 5 years. That's about half of what we saw with IIJA, but more in line with what we saw with the FAST Act, which was what was the surface transportation reauthorization we had prior to IIJA. So this one, let me see if I don't know if I can get the I don't know if I can get the acronym right, but they're calling it Bill 250. I forget what BUILD stands for. It's some long, very painful acronym that someone is very proud of themselves about. And then the 250 because it is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So we're looking at a $580 billion authorization level. $474 billion of that is going to the trust fund, $65 billion in general fund authorization for passenger rail, $41 billion in general fund authorization for discretionary grants. There are significantly fewer discretionary grants in this surface transportation bill than there was in IIJA, which I actually think is a thing a lot of us are kind of relieved about. And then 90% of the HUTF resources are distributed by formula. Formula for surface transportation and transit remains the same. One of the big things that we're seeing is that there is a new bridge program. And so this is actually pretty exciting. There's going to be $9.2 billion per year for this new bridge formula program. It is a similar formula to what we saw through IIJA. There's going to be a $200 million set aside for culverts. 20% of that is going to be for off-system bridges. 25% is going to be for localities. And then states are guaranteed to get at least what we got for bridges from the bridge formula program. We're going to at least get our 2026 funding levels. So that's good. That gives us something to count on moving forward. There are some big environmental changes. This administration has been very focused on permitting reform and cutting what they refer to as environmental red tape. So what they've done is they've made it a little bit easier for states to take on NEPA assignments. That's something that states all over the country are kind of looking at. I know Colorado is looking at it. There is going to be an expansion to categorical exclusion thresholds. That's a pretty big deal. I believe it's going from 6 million to 12 million. That's a pretty big deal for Colorado. We use categorical exclusions a lot. And so this is going to give us more flexibility to have more projects go through the CADX program, CADX process, I should say. We are seeing a lot of eliminations of programs that we were in IIJA. We knew that was coming. The carbon reduction program is eliminated. However, programs that were eligible under carbon reduction are now eligible under, I believe, CMAQ. So while the program is being eliminated, projects that were eligible under the program still have access to a source of funding. The Protect Formula program. Protect was a program that was designed to help harden infrastructure against against climate change, essentially. Projects that were being infrastructure that had been damaged by extreme weather, flooding, mudslides. You know, we don't know anything about any of that. But that formula program is going away. The Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program, the Low-No Emissions Bus Program, the Build Grant Program, ironically going away under the Build legislation, but they're replacing it with something that they're calling the STAG. I don't know if they're calling it STAG or referring to it as STAG. I haven't heard yet, but that's going to be the Surface Transportation Accelerator Grant Program. I feel like in every surface transportation reauthorization, they love messing with the acronyms. So Tiger became, I don't even know if I'm going to remember. Tiger became Raise, became Build. No, Tiger became Build, became Raise, became Build again, and now is going to become STAG under this legislation. So keep in mind, as I said, we're on mile 2 of a 26-mile or 26.5-mile marathon. NPOs and local governments are going to be seeing some changes as well and some access to some more funding. Safe Streets for All, the discretionary program, remains intact. NPOs are going to have more obligation time, have a longer obligation timeline for their planning funds. NPOs have the ability, if they meet certain requirements, to become direct recipients for planning funds. And there's going to be an increased federal share for grant programs. So that's pretty exciting. Freight and multimodal, we are seeing an increase in, there's going to be a focus on high priority corridors. There's a new truck parking discretionary grant program. And there's going to be an increased designation mileage for the primary highway freight system. So we're still kind of sussing out what that means. So there's so much, guys. I'm trying to decide how much I want to tell you. So public transportation, transit is going to see a little bit of a cut, but not as much as we thought. Rail transportation is going to see some changes. One of the big things that ended up in this House that passed the House is the White House was pushing a rail safety bill, which has some requirements. The Senate does not like them. A lot of the conservative members of the Senate think that it is onerous and puts too much and is too much of a burden for the rail freight transportation sector. We'll see how that plays out. I don't know. But it was not originally in the House transportation bill that went through THUD. Excuse me, not through THUD. Went through House TNI. There's too many acronyms, you guys. Went through House TNI. It was not originally in that. The White House put a lot of pressure on Sam Graves, who is the chair. He did not originally want it in. He does not support it, but they did put, Sue, I will work on getting something out to you guys. I apologize. This is too much for a presentation, and so I'll need to put something together for you. It's just moving so fast. So that said, where we stand right now. So it has passed the House, or excuse me, it has passed the House committee. It still has to go through Ways and Means. It still has, there's one other committee of jurisdiction that has a very small portion of some of the funding stuff. I think it's like science and technology. And then it needs to go to the full House. It needs to go to the Rules Committee, and then it needs to go to the full House. So still quite a bit to go in the House. That said, I do actually think this has a pretty good shot of passing the House before the midterm elections. I think this is a really good political talking point as members go back to their districts to be able to say, I voted for housing, which is what they've just done, and I voted for transportation. It's very good politics for them. This bill is pretty middle of the road. It's very bipartisan. It did not cut transit and environmental programs to the extent that we worried that they would. And it also allows for more funding for, traditional surface transportation priorities in terms of roads and bridges and things like that. So I think it's going to pass the House. Again, please don't go to prediction markets with what I'm saying. The Senate is another calculation. The Senate has a couple of ways that they'll go. They have not introduced none of their committees of jurisdiction, which is Environmental and Public Works, Commerce, and finance. None of them have produced language yet. We are hearing rumblings that there's something going on, but we haven't seen anything yet. So even if it does pass the House, the Senate, there's a lot of election math that's going to go into it in terms of how many wins the Democrats want to give the Republicans, if they want to give them any, if they decide this is the best legislation that they're going to get and they should pass it before it expires at the end of the year and before the elections. That's definitely a calculation they could make if they don't think they're going to take back the Senate. If they do think they're going to take back the Senate and they want to put in their own legislation, then they could hold it up and we could get a continuing resolution. So at this point, I think it's about 50-50. I don't know that we'll get a bill, honestly, that will pass both chambers and get signed by the president by the end of when it expires. However, I do think we'll get it through the House. So that was a lot of information. We have a lot of steps to go, but can I answer any questions?
Questions, Kristen?
No.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Really great. I know there's a lot in there, so I was furiously taking notes. So I appreciate
Yeah,
that. you're
sorry, I
sending
realized
something.
that.
No, that's
I'll
okay.
draft
Yeah.
something to get it out to you guys.
I mean, it's complicated. My only question is, when does the current one expire? And so then,
Yeah.
yeah.
September 30th, 2026.
Okay,
So
so
what we
we
would
will
see
probably see a CR then, because it's not
Yes.
going to definitely pass through. Even if it passes through the House, Senate is going to probably hold it up.
Yeah, I heard somewhere, and I haven't verified this, but I think there's only like 6 legislative weeks before they go, we have not that much time between August recess and then the election, because traditionally they've taken a lot of time off before the elections, like October. And a lot of them are in very complicated races right now. And so I think the House probably in their best interest is going to be giving their members a lot of time on the ground to be campaigning.
Thank you.
Even
Yeah, you had mentioned something about they're taking away the carbon reduction, but it would still go under CMAQ, but we don't, I mean, we're a small MPO, so we wouldn't qualify for that. Does that mean that we would be completely taken out of that? And then, so do you know that information, or do they don't have it specific?
I have not gotten that nitty gritty into that language. I'm sorry. I really haven't looked that closely at that program. I can definitely look at that and see if I can find that kind of information. I don't think you'll be completely shut out of it, but I also don't I have to look at how the CMAQ, because CMAQ is changing a little bit and I just don't know the nitty gritty on that. But let me look at that.
Any other questions? Yeah, and if you could get that summary out for us. It's a lot to try to summarize.
It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's probably going to change. So
Right.
Don't get too attached to anything in it.
Right. It's a point in time. So thank you for that comprehensive update.
Thanks, guys. And as always, shoot me an email if you need anything.
Okay. Thank you. We are running quite a bit ahead, so I think we'll go ahead and go to the STIP if Jamie Collins is on. If not, we'll take a short break.
I am here. I am here. Let me turn on my camera as well. You can kind of see me. Aaron, are you guys putting up the presentation, or do you want me to?
Yeah, put it up.
And I actually did this presentation. It's kind of a 2-part presentation because since we went live with Project Tracker back in November, we were hoping to give everyone an overview of at least our website, our new website. So that's kind of the second half of this whole slide presentation. We'll get to that point when we get there, and I'll ask you if you want me to continue. Everything is in your packet, but we kept having to delay because we had to talk about 10-year plan and other things that were more important, legislative issues. So the project tracker stuff kept getting kind of shuffled off to the end. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But this morning I really wanted to talk about the STIP, and you can go ahead and put the next slide up, Erin. So overall, our schedule is, we opened our public comment period on April 27th, and it just closed last Friday. I received a few comments here and there, not a whole lot, mostly technical stuff from FHWA and FTA, which is to be, it's sort of status quo. That's what they do for me. They make sure I keep everything on the up and up for everyone. We held the public hearing with the commission on May 21st, and now we are going to go back to the commission on June 18th and ask them to adopt the STIP, and then send everything over to FHWA and FTA so that they can approve it by June 30th, so we can go live with our new STIP on July 1. Next slide, please. So some big changes that came through with the STIP this year is I rewrote the guidelines for the project priority programming process, the 4P guidelines, as well as updated the STIP amendment guidelines. And most of those changes were kind of to strengthen the use of our new software for Project Tracker, to say that it is now our e-STIP of record, if you will. And also just to strengthen some of the other items that we had in there, like how do we incorporate transit projects, especially from the direct recipients in a lot of the MPO areas, making sure that we're covering all of the transit projects and getting them incorporated into the STIP quickly and accurately, and just things in general. The other thing, I did add a new section in the STIP amendment guidelines for how do we process TIP adoptions. So once an MPO board takes action, how do we take that information that we receive from the MPOs, package it up, get it to the executive director here at CDOT so she can sign the things that she needs to sign, like self-certifications and a letter to the governor. And then we have a letter that we draft for the governor to go ahead and give his final approval on that. And then how we send all that back out to the MPOs. So that's a whole new section in the STIP amendment guidelines. As I said, we have the new software that we're using. I've gotten pretty good feedback from my users on their impressions of what the software is like to work in and how it's going. We had some major glitches at the beginning, but we have pretty much ironed those out, and we're really working right now to finalize some things to improve a couple of the reports and things that people can see online, etc. So that's the software. The 10-year plan, well, that was adopted May 21st, so yay. And that actually will help us with the STIP stuff, because some of the comments that I received were, why isn't my 10-year plan project in the draft STIP? Well, we had to wait for the commission to adopt this iteration of the 10-year plan before we can start putting them in the STIP. So some of those projects will start appearing in the STIP here now. We can start adding them, and then we'll take that to the commission, like I said, here in a couple of weeks, and keep moving forward. Next slide, please. So comments. We have received a couple of comments. There was one gentleman who wanted to make sure, and this was actually, I think, the person that Gary was referring to. He wanted to make sure that 385 gets addressed, and he wanted to make sure that we as a state agency keep our focus statewide rather than just along the Front Range, and particularly the Denver metro area. So we took his comments, and we are, I think Darius might be coming to the Eastern TPR. I'm not sure, but I know we are. It was from somebody from the Eastern TPR who sent that comment. So we are addressing that, and we will be talking to those people. Like I said, a lot of the other comments we received were technical, and part of the things that we got from FHWA and FTA were kind of to minimize the duplication of effort. I have a lot of, if you look on the website where the STIP draft STIP is. I have everything lined up as chapters. And so the 4P guidelines are in there, the STIP amendment guidelines. We have, for example, glossaries in like every single document. And sometimes the definitions are the same. Sometimes they're worded slightly different. So one of the things I'm cleaning up right now is to make sure that all of those definitions are consistent between documents. And one suggestion that I received was, let's just make a glossary as a separate document for the STIP document online. So we will probably be seeing that next year for next year's iteration. Next slide. All right, my tasks to complete before I go to the commission on June 18th. I need to finalize the corrections that I've been given. I'm still responding to some of the comments that we've received. And then I will take it to the commission on June 18th and submit it to FHWA and FTA for final approval. And with that, I will pause here and ask if anyone has any questions regarding the STIP itself.
Yeah. Any questions from anyone? Okay. Not
Okay.
seeing any, so thank you.
Okay, do you want me to continue on with the overview, or do you want me to just, it's in the packet and it's all step by step laid out. So yeah, I'm going to leave it up to you if you want me to continue on with
Jamie,
the...
there is a question. Emily Barrett looks like.
Oh, now I see it. Emily, what's your question?
I apologize. It took me a minute to find my raised hand.
Oh, trust me, I understand.
So I guess there's just some confusion around the STIP updates and how they'll, so, you know, that projects, how it aligns with the MPOs and our TIP process, because just curious if you can kind of explain like what the updates are for the STIP in particular, and maybe you want to follow up later, and that's fine.
Are you referring specifically to the different schedules that we're on? Because like North Front Range and Dr. Cog update their TIPs every 2 years. And then Grand Valley, Pueblo, and Pikes Peak, I think, are on an annual update cycle. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, just how the STIP and the TIP have to be in alignment.
Right.
So that the projects have to be included in the MPO's TIP process in order to receive funding. So just curious how that's going to work out, I guess.
It is laid out in our STIP amendment guidelines. To address the schedule differences first, like I said, Dr. Cog and North Front Range update your TIPs every other year. And actually, Dr. Cog is doing more of a massive update this time. So they're going to actually kind of jump ahead of us, I think, by the time, or maybe they'll be lined up. I don't know. I don't know when they're going to be. I can't remember off the top of my head when Dr. Cog is adopting their next TIP. But anyway, what we typically do, because we have a 4-year STIP, you have a 4-year TIP, if our schedules are not in alignment and say, like right now we are FY27, we're going into FY27 to 30. And if your TIP ends at FY29, there will be no projects for North Front Range in FY30 because you don't have an active TIP for that year yet. And that's just an example. Sometimes we line up for the full 4 years and sometimes we're off a year. So if there is a year missing from the TIP to the STIP, that MPO's projects for that missing year will not be included in the STIP. It has to be in the TIP first. That's the federal guidance. Now, as far as amending TIPs and amending the STIP, that is in the amendment guidelines. We have an MOU with each MPO, and it allows CDOT to allow the MPOs to do their TIP amendment process, whether it's administrative or like a policy amendment. The MPOs will do their TIP process, their amendment process. Then we get that information done once the board has taken action. And then I put together a table that summarizes all of the amendments that have taken place in an MPO during a month period and package that up. I send it to the executive director, Lou. She signs for it. The regulations say the governor has to sign for all new TIPs and for TIP amendments. The governor has delegated approval authority for TIP amendments to the CDOT executive director. So for the actual TIP adoptions, yes, we send that whole packet to the governor. For TIP amendments, we take them to Director Lou. She looks over the packet and then she signs it. And then we send that information. Once it's approved, we send that back out to the MPOs. Does that help answer your questions?
Yeah, so it sounds like a really simple, straightforward process.
Yes, and it is memorialized. It is in the STIP amendment guidelines if you need to look it up.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions on that part? Okay, go on to the next.
All right, for our overview, this is when you go to the website, and as you see up here in the upper left corner, I have the link to the website. This is kind of, it's a sort of in a separate spot from our regular STIP webpage on the internet, but you can get to here from our STIP homepage. So when you get to our new STIP website, you'll see this introductory page. And if you'll notice, there are some tabs, and I don't know how well you can see it on the screen because it's kind of light blue. But over here on the right-hand side, you'll see welcome, projects, plan revisions, interactive map, and visualizations. These are different sections of the website that you can go and find information on. Next slide, please, Erin. The projects tab, and you can see it's highlighted here. You can come in here and you can start looking for projects. It defaults to everything in the current STIP. We currently, if you look on the upper left underneath my text, you'll see 26 to 29 STIP. That is our current STIP. This will change. It'll be 27 to 30 once we get everything adopted and move forward on July 1st. But you will, currently you can go in here and there's a drop down. You can look at prior STIPs if you need to. The other thing is this is kind of a, it's kind of a generic search engine here, but if you go over to the right and see what I've kind of boxed in red, there's an advanced search option. Next slide, please, Erin. And this, if you click on that advanced search, you can actually come in here and search by STIP ID, project type. And the project types are the different categories that we've started using, such as asset management, active transportation, environmental, transit, enterprises, others, and those sort of things. Safety, I think, is one of them. And then we have the fund source. Currently, the fund source is not fund program. This is the federal programs and the state programs. So it'll be STBG or SHF or Senate Bill 260, 230, all of those. But this is the quick and easiest way on this page is to search by the STIP ID, and you can do that here. Go to the next page, next slide. This is the plan revisions. We are constantly changing stuff administratively, largely because when we go to actually put a project out for ad and stuff, sometimes we have to adjust the STIP amount to match what the budget amount will be. If all of you remember, some of you are probably newer, but Project Tracker does go back and talk to our SAP financial system. So, and everything in SAP has to be tied to a STIP ID in order to be budgeted. So if we have minor changes in the funding, we have to make them in the STIP before we can budget them on the SAP side. All of these instances here are like revisions that we've made, and we usually do one revision per week. But you can go in here and see what was changed on any of these particular cycles, as well as the current one. Next slide. The mapping. This one I really like this mapping thing. You can go in here, it brings up projects that have been mapped. And if you look over here, kind of in the middle on the left, you'll see it says 260 projects. That number changes as you scroll in and out, zoom in and out on the map, because it's kind of looking as to what's on your screen and what are we really looking at. So this number is flexible. All of our projects that have been mapped will show up here. So if you need to zoom in, you can find something more specific. If you zoom all the way out, you're going to get a larger number, but it's not going to actually go into all of the detail until you're like zoomed in and looking for your specifics. Next slide, please. If you do click on the map on a route, it'll give you a little pop-up and it'll give you the STIP ID, the project name, the project type, and this is related to the project types I was talking to you about on the search engine. We also have 10-year plan in here. How I forgot that, don't ask, because we all are living by 10-year plan at the moment. But it also gives you a summary total cost of the project and what funding years have been STIP'd. Next slide, please. You can also, way back on that mapping side, you could see like a list of projects off on the right left-hand side. And if you clicked on any of those, it will also bring you up this summary screen of what the project is. And this one isn't matching the one that I had on the prior slide because I'm just giving you samples here. But this will summarize all of the project. Again, the fund source, and we are actually having Eco Interactive, who is the software company, we're trying to change the fund source to fund program. So even though you can see like this is HSIP, you probably want to know if this is safety money in, SAF, or is it faster safety? Is it surface treatment, etc.? So we're trying to change that. But right now, these are all the federal and state programs down here under fund source. Next slide. All right, this one is actually my favorite piece of this website, because all of those categories I told you about, 10-year plan, active transportation, asset management, etc., down the list, all show up on this pie chart. And if you click anywhere on the pie chart or on any of these items over here on the left, it will bring up the list of projects that have been categorized under these categories. So if you wanted to see all of the 10-year plan projects in summary, you could click on 10-year plan and it would bring them up. And I think, Aaron, if you click on the next slide, I think I have yeah, so this is actually a sample of asset management, but it brings up all of the projects that have been assigned to our asset management program. Next slide. I think that's everything. So if anybody has any questions about the website, I'm happy to answer them. As always, if you can't find something on the website and you're looking for something specific, you can always reach out to me or Riley Adamy. She is my cohort in STIP management over here. She works in the Division of Accounting and Finance. And we also, you can also reach out to your region planners. Eva, you have a question?
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, this is really great, and thank you for showing this again. I think it's going to be really helpful. Just my question about the different categories. You had active transportation. How did you? Because I know like sometimes, a project can have more than one aspect. It can be maybe it has bike lanes, but then it's a surface treatment, things like that. How did you make that determination of the category?
We kind of did it. It's kind of subjective, if you will, but it's largely based for the active transportation. It's kind of largely based on the primary funding program. So like MMOF is active transportation. CMAQ tends to be either active transportation or transit. So it kind of depends on what the project itself is. So we're kind of making a subjective determination, if you will. But we basically went through all the projects, sent them out to all of the region planners and asked them to help us categorize these back in October. And we've been continuously updating that list as we move forward. But yeah, it is kind of subjective. If it's mostly surface treatment, we're calling it asset management. If it's mostly bridge, asset management. If it's receiving primarily enterprise funding, it's an enterprise, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Emily, you have another question?
Yeah, just quickly, in the memo, it mentions the updates to the 4P guidelines. I'm just wondering if you could just kind of briefly walk through what those updates are or how we find out what those are.
The biggest update to both the 4P and the STIP amendment guidelines was adding references to our new software. We are moving away from having hard copy STIP iterations posted on the website. We now have a live active STIP. So for both documents, we've put language in there stating that our e-STIP is our STIP of record. We may send you a snapshot in time, but that snapshot may not match what's on Project Tracker or on the website because things are very fluid in the STIP. So you may have a snapshot in time, but if you really need to know what the current funding is, please go to the website. That is our STIP of record right now.
Thank you.
Anything else? Great.
Others. Thank you, Jamie, for all the
Great. Have a great day,
information.
everyone.
All right. Okay, I think we'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and do the multimodal options fund. Be back in 10 minutes, so 9:55.
Chair, as a reminder, we did have the STIP adoption listed as an action item. So it's pointed out.
Oh, that is right. We're supposed to recommend adoption. Thank you for
Yeah.
reminding me. Okay, we'll call this back to order. I was just reminded we needed to act on adoption of the STIP recommendation to the commission. So would entertain a motion to recommend adoption of the STIP.
Chair, I move to recommend adoption of the STIP.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone that opposes recommending adoption of the STIP? Seeing no objections, motion carries that we will recommend adoption of the STIP to the commission. Okay, thank you. All right, up next is our multimodal option fund update with Michael Snow.
Yes, good morning, Chair. I wasn't sure if Darius was going to be here. Oh, just remembering he's not here. So I'm going to put some slides up and provide updates to everybody today on status of things with the MMOF program and some things for everybody to consider. Having trouble with my slides, so give me just a moment. All right. Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my slides here. And so first off, I want to just kind of get back to, again, this shouldn't be too much news since we talked about this before, but updates on the actual financing of the program and so forth, and things that have changed at the Capitol. With their adopted FY27 budget, there were two bills that affected the MMOF program directly. The first was House Bill 1399, and this is what effectuated the elimination of the previously committed $10.5 million annual general fund transfer into the program. So that's a straight, reduction of funds that were previously allocated to TPRs and made available for awards. The second one was House Bill 1398, and this one sought to keep the actual funding levels in the state program approximately equal. If you all recall, those funds are committed fully by our Transportation Commission to Bustang operations. And so that kind of keeps their funding level the same while the decrease is kind of felt by the local program. So it changes that 85-15 split to 70-30. And then, generally our, I put the word stability in here for long-term revenue stability, and I realized in hindsight, I probably wouldn't use that word. But at the current moment, all other funds beyond, like for FY30 and 31 and 32, those general fund transfers remain, and the portion of our retail delivery fees remain the same for what's coming to the program. Continuing to see slow growth of those retail delivery fees. So no other changes to those beyond the 3 years that were affected in House Bill 1399. Was there a question? I heard a sound. No. Okay. All right, then I'll just keep going. With these financial changes, we're looking throughout everything as we do every time something happens in the formulas and the total dollar amounts. We kind of make adjustments to everything. We also try to look under the cushions and pull everything together, as we did a year ago when we lost a good sum of funding. We also made the effort to realize some previously unallocated revenues, and that includes interest earnings that continue to accrue anytime we have a balance of revenues in the fund. So we're adding an additional $6.2 million approximately in interest earnings, and that includes a little bit more revenues collected in FY25 than previously anticipated, but it's also revenues accumulated this year in FY26 and some anticipated revenues for FY27. There's some very slight adjustments. Every year we get some adjustments to the actual retail delivery fees from the previous projections, and that of course is just based on what does the current year look like, and then as they reconcile the previous year. So there's a little bit of shifting around there, both up and down. What this kind of equates to, so how does this compare to where we are? So total funding to the entire program now in that 27 to 29 timeframe is reduced by 36.6%. And that includes all the factors we just talked about, including the interest earnings and so forth. On the state program side, they're now going to be allocated 30% of the share, and that maintains their current funding levels, and in a few cases increases it very slightly. On the local MMF program side, and this is where everybody's interest would be, the total local allocations are going to be reduced over the 3-year period by 48.3%. So I think in our previous updates, we've said it was approximately half. And so it's just about that, just a little shy of having the previous allocations in those years. Our future years are reduced by 17.7%. So that is shifting from 85% share down to a 70% share of the entire program revenues. Questions? Okay. All right, so let's move on. So some other topics we need to kind of talk about, and we typically do this every time we have updates to the local TPR, MPO allocations, and that is our administrative set-asides. So just some background for anybody that hasn't heard this. The local MMOF program, it requires a considerable amount of CDOT staff time for program management, for management and oversight of the individual projects. So that includes, everything from my time and effort, other folks on our planning team, planning staff throughout the regions, financial and contract writers. But also in our regions, we have numerous specialty units that in some cases do considerable amount of work to actually get through some of the clearances and assist those projects to get to a ready state. And in some cases, some regions' staff is just inadequate to handle the surges of projects that come through this program. And so they've executed contracts with engineering and construction management firms to help oversee a large number of projects. So all those kind of add up to some additional costs to the local program. And we've always set aside funds for that reason and been able to, so it actually helps us to defray those costs. The rate that we do so has shifted pretty regularly. When we initially started the program back in 2019 and 20, we estimated we would need 5% set aside. So we set aside 5% of those early years budgets. We then adjusted that down to 2%, and we set aside those amounts in 22, 23, and 24. And then last year, because we lost all those funds to the program, we sought to sort of buffer the impact to you all and to your local programs. And rather than sitting on a large balance in our admin set-asides, which we do need, but rather than sitting on that balance, we returned a sum total of 3 million previous set-asides to the TPR pools and reallocated those to the regions. So that brings us to today. I will just say, the one thing takeaway I would like everybody to understand is that the percentage that we might set aside in each year is not correlated much at all to the actual dollar amounts we spend in each year. So we're still seeing through right now the largest surge of our stimulus funded projects. So all those that have ARPA and the ARPA replacement funds and the stimulus fund, or the surplus state revenues that came from Senate Bill 260, that all created a very large wave of project work being implemented, and a good many of them are underway now. So we're currently just about depleted on the entire admin set-aside pool. And meanwhile, we're getting smaller annual funding levels, but we're going to continue to see a pretty sizable admin costs, and we're expecting that to again exceed a little bit over $1 million this year, due to those stimulus funded projects moving through the hopper and getting implemented. So staff want to propose to keep that whole, to do something a little different, and rather than just percentage shifts around every year, we're proposing that we set aside a flat amount of $900,000 to return back to the set aside pool, and then adjust the annual set aside amount upward to 3% for the years thereafter. So that would begin with FY28. Thoughts or questions on the admin set asides? Okay. All right. Well, everybody, this meeting is all about efficiency today, so we'll keep moving. All right. All right, so this brings us back to, okay, great. We've lost some additional funding. What does this all mean, and how do we manage it? Our central message today, and CDOT staff recommendation to the TPRs and NPOs, is counter to what we did last year. So if you recall, last year when we lost the funding, we set all of the regions in motion to reconcile all of their awards. We are recommending to not do so this time. So through all that work, every TPR and NPO's allocations out through FY29, except for a few dollars in a couple regions, have been programmed to projects, and done so year by year to constrain to those years' previous projections. So we're recommending that those not be amended, and instead we're going to proposing to utilize your FY30 and 31 allocations to backfill those project awards and keep them all whole. But it also means, using, we need additional years' funds to actually implement those projects. So we'll continue using the cash management strategy, meaning projects that are ready can move ahead and implement sooner than the years in which their funds are awarded. And on the next slide, I'll talk more about the concepts of that cash management strategy and what that means to everything. What this means, so if you can kind of now envision here what this all means to projects, is that you have projects awarded in a 3-year time period, but it's going to require a 5-year time period for those all to be for them all to access their funds and be implemented. Questions? Okay. I do see a hand up. Hi, Emily.
Hi, sorry. So I assume that the backfill that you're recommending uses the MMOF funds in the future years that are not cut. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, so I was on I'm on several commissions and coalitions and advocated heavily with the JBC this session to really encourage them not to cut the MMOF funds permanently. And I think, they heard us, and I appreciate that. And so the result was that it was only a 3-year cut rather than a permanent cut. But I think that my feeling, and I think others would agree with me from that experience, is that those funds are not guaranteed. And it seems like a difficult for local governments, in particular with our sort of tighter budgets, to rely on funds that are not guaranteed for the future. So I'm just curious, how do we navigate that, and what is the strategy there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I may turn it back to our government relations folks, if they're still on, to talk about how they relayed this. I mean, we did all work together. It is, I would just say, we've been working much harder to try to portray to our legislators the complexities of implementing transportation projects. And the numbers that they often look at, I think, make it seem much different, right? If they see big outstanding balances in the fund, it just can be very easily understood as maybe, those are funds we can take back, not understanding the very many years long process that it takes to program and award funds and then get prepared for implementation. Those realities are just not common knowledge. So we're doing everything we can to help them understand that, and that it's not as simple of making cutbacks. It doesn't just affect things in the current year. It can affect things several years in the future. And that's been challenging. I think we're getting a little better at it. It really makes a difference, and made a difference, that so many locals reached out directly. I think it made a difference that the STAC wrote a letter expressing such. And I think we just need to continue that. I saw Jeff pop up for a moment. I don't know if Jeff has thoughts on that strategy and communication, but
no,
hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Michael. And I think, I think you raise a good point that, unfortunately, I think there is a lot of uncertainty with the MMOF. I think it's great that the cut was not made permanent, but we all know that doesn't mean that that funding stream couldn't change in the future. So I think on the flip side, I think part of the reason that DTD is not recommending to reduce or delay MMOF awards is, if we sort of remove projects from the pipeline, so to speak, it's going to make it a lot easier to take those funds in the future. And so I think I think we are in a situation where there is a lot of uncertainty, that we have awards and we want to try to move those forward to the best of our ability, but that could change. We may have more projects that are ready to move forward than the revenues available, and that's that's the later bullet on Michael's slide, right? That means projects might be delayed and have to wait until revenues become available. If the funding stream is further changed to the negative by the legislature, that will obviously impact our ability to maintain funding for projects. So I think we are operating in an area of a lot of uncertainty. I think that does make it challenging for local governments to plan. But I think the alternative is to sort of just rescind awards. And I'm not sure that's a great strategy either, because then you've completely eliminated the possibility of that project being funded, and you've made it a lot easier to take the funds. But it does mean that we're going to continue to live in a world of uncertainty with respect to MMOF funds. But I think I think we're trying to do what we can to keep the pipeline of projects moving to the extent that the revenues that we do have support the pace of those projects moving forward.
I appreciate that, Chair. If I may add, so in Erie, we were utilizing MMOF funds to launch our brand new on-demand transit microtransit program, and it's wildly successful. It's great, but the MMOF funds were cut while we were in the planning process, and so our wonderful, amazing staff that we have in Erie was able to pivot and find some other funding revenues and avenues so that we didn't cut the program. So I guess I'm looking at it kind of from two perspectives. I understand that we need to have these projects that say these funds are important. So I appreciate CDOT's strategy of demonstrating that these are important to local governments and that we can utilize the funds and we don't want money just sitting in an account. But then from a local government perspective of trying to deliver projects and improvements and things with an uncertain, revenue stream or uncertain funding is difficult. It's hard on local governments, and I know we're all in the same boat. But I just wanted to sort of illuminate that there's also the struggle for local governments to keep our promises to our constituents around projects when we have uncertain funding. So, but anyway, I appreciate CDOT's strategy as well as just saying, we have the projects, we need these funds. And I appreciate that the state is in our budget situation has just been awful. So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to highlight that.
Good. Are there any other questions? Oh, Dana, hi.
Hello. So just to clarify, if there's funds that are already under a grant agreement, those will not be rescinded. Is that correct? And then there'll just be a balance because I know there was like
correct
some projects, if they were ready early, we were using some.
Yeah, so on the next slide, I talk a little bit more about what is this cash management and what exactly does it mean. So I did put a bit in here about when we commit funds to a project. I wanted to make sure we talked about that because there's been some confusion. I get questions from locals saying, we're underway, our project's underway right now, are we going to lose some of these funds? And then I find that they've actually got an IGA in place. They have an option letter that encumbers the funds. They've gone to add, and they've already hired the contractor. And that's a state of commitment that we would be very, very unlikely to ever affect them. Why? Because what we can do is say, well, if we're running out of available funds in the current year, then it just means that subsequent projects have to pause or wait another year till they can begin implementation. But when we say they are when they're at a ready state and we commit the funds to their project, what that means is we execute that contracting mechanism, typically called an option letter, which formally encumbers the funds and gives them the notice to proceed in using them. We don't come back and take those funds. Instead, when we lose funds like we just did, it means that the projects that have not yet begun may now have to wait a little longer till the funds are available for their phase of their project. So in the cash management strategy, the programming that you all did, in other words, what you awarded to projects and in which years, does matter somewhat still, but we are allowing up to 2 years future amounts to be committed to a project phase when the project is ready. And that is all dependent on the fixed amount that CDOT has available in the current year pools. So there is a limit, and it also means that we're prioritizing the projects that are ready sooner. I shouldn't say projects. It prioritizes the phases of the projects that are ready sooner. And on the counter side of that, folks need to realize that that means that as you're later to the, I don't know what else words to use, but as those projects that are later to the trough are the ones more likely to be told that funds won't be available and they may have to wait for another fiscal year's appropriation or even two before those funds, adequate funds are available to them. Does that kind of answer and clarify, Dana, and for others?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay. Let's see if there was anything else I forgot to mention here. So, the next question is, everybody, and I say everybody, local agency project sponsors are certainly going to be wondering, well, what does it mean to my project? I had been planning, let's say, to start a design phase or a construction phase this year. Are the funds going to be available? And we want to be able to provide as much, transparent information about that as we can. But that's not an easy exercise. Why? Because we don't necessarily always have very solid information on when projects are actually going to be ready to implement a phase. We may have information from a local agency as to the dates that they originally wanted to do so, but that doesn't mean they get there at that time, right? Everybody's seen how easy it is to suddenly find you've got additional clearances or studies or right away to acquire before you can fix the sidewalk. Those kind of things can cause delays. So we're going to be working very hard, and CDOT's various project managers who coordinate directly with the local agencies will be working very hard over the coming weeks to compile the most likely implementation schedules to expect for each project. And with that, we'll be able to put together a project funding schedule that will say approximately when projects will be able to access their funds. The other side of that is that we also need to know what kind of funding we have available and what kind of, what's the dollar amount in every year to expect. And we have quite a lot more to do to really understand the lay of the land for that right now, particularly as we're closing out the current fiscal year. So that will be coming to you in the coming weeks. So this kind of brings us to the last slide and just the next steps and things that I want everybody to kind of take away. The good thing is we are not asking TPRs, MPOs to take any actions on your current awards. There might be additional questions here that we can take up, from the MPOs, considering, you have a tip that is constrained to the actual year by year expected funding. And if you're not reconciling those awards to the new allocations, that means there's some misalignment. And if there's some concern there, I would kind of invite that we have those, MPO specific type of questions at perhaps a subsequent statewide MPO or something like that. But other than that, we do expect TPRs to withhold any further award making. The next time you would be doing that, as it is with our MMWF policy, is that we've always said TPRs may award funds within the years of our current STIP. So that means that not until 2027 would you be awarding what would be remaining of your FY31 funds. And through all this discussion, that made me realize it did not refer back to the materials I provided you all in your packet. There is a table that shows you the sum total that you have awarded to projects in 2027 through 29, and then what that means if we use your 2030 and your 31 allocations to backfill them. You'll see that it provides you in the far right column what your dollar amount remains in the FY31 year that you can award to new projects. So that would be what you may consider making awards of next year at this time. Questions on that? That was kind of a mouthful. Okay. So next steps to the local agencies who are actually carrying out MMOF funded projects. I mentioned that we'll need to know and put together a financial schedule for the entire statewide MMOF program projects. So I just want to make sure that local agency project leads are coordinating with your project managers and communicating the status of projects in the coming weeks so that we can have a well-informed project schedule. I think I called it project phase schedule, project funding schedule. Didn't mean to confuse that. But one other thing is, I want to kind of get back to financial management and smart use of our public funds. It is very, very important for local agencies to be caught up and current on the billing of actual expenditures that have incurred on projects. When we are coming to the close of this fiscal year, this is particularly important. So I really, really want to urge local agencies that lead these projects or have financial involvement with them to make sure CDOT is billed for all your known project expenses up through the end of this month. So if I can encourage everybody to relay that back to your project teams, that would be very helpful. And I'd said for CDOT, we'll roll out a project financial schedule in the coming weeks. And either myself or my teammate, Medora Bornhoft, who's also here, we'll be attending your TPR meetings and your TAC meetings to provide direct updates, similar to what we just talked through today. And that's kind of it. Any other questions out there? Hi, Emily.
Hi, I apologize that I'm asking so many questions.
No, it's okay.
But so I guess it's difficult to know whether current projects and tips will be funded or not. It sounds like I'm just clarifying, I guess, what I heard, that whether the funding will be there, it's more of a phasing approach for CDOT, or do you think there will be cuts to projects in the tip currently?
Yeah, no. What we've said is there won't be cuts to the projects, but it may just be that a tip currently might say that a project is awarded, let's say, funds in 27 and 28. But if those projects are attempting to actually begin an implementation in 28, they may not have all those funds. We may not have those funds available, and so this financial schedule will imply that they may be having to wait until the beginning of FY29 or even FY30. Does that make sense? And I mentioned this is by phase. Good example is that an infrastructure project may have design work, and the design phase gets funded and the work is underway. And let's say they want to get to construction next fall, but our current balance means that they actually are going to have to wait until the following fiscal year, which begins July 1 each year, until they can get the funding for that construction phase. So that's just as a theoretical example of how that might play out for some projects.
Thank you.
Yep. Dana?
So I just have one question about MMF. I recall, I thought it was like a year, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. The revenue was tracking higher than projected. And so there was like a cut off the top for busting back then. So that it didn't really change the projections going to local governments because the revenue was coming in higher. And I was just wondering, I couldn't remember if that was like a one-time thing or if that had continued. I didn't go back and look if it was a one-time thing. I just remember it being a thing. So I just wanted to check and see.
I'm trying to think what you might be referring to, but the reality is that is in statute. So in no case do we waiver from the 85-15 split in previous years, and now 70-30 for subsequent years.
I'm wondering, Michael, if what Dana is what you're referring to. I think when we had the first round of cuts, the 71 some million a year ago, I think at that point in time, we reconciled revenues, and because when we're planning, at least for the retail delivery fee revenue, which is fee revenue, it's a forecast, right? And so it's inevitably going to be higher or lower than forecasted. I think about a year ago, what we did is we reconciled the revenue. We also hadn't been forecasting initially the interest earnings on the balances. And so after we reconciled sort of the actual fee collections versus forecasted and accounted for interest, it ended up giving us sort of a plus up that we were able to apply against the reduction. So it meant that we didn't have to take the full amount of that reduction. But I think that was a little bit of a one-time feature, probably just because we hadn't initially forecasted the earnings. I think going forward, we are forecasting the earnings. There still will be adjustments based on revenue reconciliation, overs and unders, but probably won't be that as significant as that. So if that's
Okay.
that might be what you're referring
that might be. All right, thank you.
So Dana, I think maybe the other thing I'm just remembering is that when the legislature took back the 71.4 million last year, it was explicitly taken from the local program and not from the state. So I guess that is counter to what's written in statute, but that was what they put through on the bill. And then another time, it wasn't a take back, but if you recall, when the legislature first directed some MMF funds to the free transit or free ride free program, that's the funds that were then managed by CASTA and provided, backfill funding for the free transit rides throughout the state. That of course was a 10 million pullout or direction of local MMF funds and not the state MMF program funds. So those are the only other differences I can think that kind of blur that line.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Ratios.
I appreciate that
Okay,
summary.
Tom.
Thanks, Michael. I think one of the questions that's likely to come up from local agencies is whether they can continue to move forward on their desired project schedule, provided that they have the financial means to front all the project costs and then receive reimbursement, maybe years later, right? And I guess I don't fully understand how to evaluate the risk in that. And this is sort of a verification question, because I think I heard you say that CDOT is committed, and forgive me if I got this wrong, this is why I want to verify, but the CDOT commits that the dollars that have been allocated will eventually flow through, but they're going to be delayed. Do I understand that correctly? Like essentially there's, if a local agency continues to advance it on their own nickel and expects repayment in the future,
yep,
that's a good expectation, right? There's not any risk in that.
Do you want to take that, Jeff?
Let me jump in on that for a second. I would say it depends. And so let me, which I know is the answer everybody loves, but, I think there is a difference between having a executed award and IGA, et cetera. To Michael's point, we're kind of, when he talks about being sort of a first to the trial approach, we are not going to execute contractual agreements with funds that are not there, that have not been appropriated by the legislature and are not available to us. What that means is that, if you come to us to a project and we have exhausted all that budget, and we will say, sorry, you're going to have to wait. And what you're going to be waiting for is sort of the next, allocation of revenue to come in the door. what, and whether that's additional retail delivery fee revenue or a restore general fund appropriation in future years. So I think generally speaking, I would say, if your project is under contract, then it is, assumed that we are able to, and Michael, jump in with nuances here, but, if you have an executed IGA with funds encumbered for a construction phase, I think then the expectation is that, yes, we will be able to reimburse you. That those agreements were executed based on the revenue that is known to be available today. I think if you are not in that case, then it is subject to the availability of revenue in the future, and that the availability of that revenue is subject to potential future changes by the legislature. So if your project is awarded and you come to us and we say, oh, we're going to have to wait until fiscal year 28, and the legislature makes a change to the revenues that they end up not being in here in fiscal year 28, then obviously we're going to tell you no when you come to the door. We're going to say you're going to have to wait another year. So so hopefully that helps clarify. I think it really sort of depends. I would say that if you have funds encumbered on construction contracts, I think the assumption is that, yes, we will, be able to honor that. I think if you're not to that point yet, we want to try to let projects move forward, but it is subject to fund availability. Michael, would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's super helpful to understand, and emphasize that executed IGA, right? Because if there, basically if there's a contract in place, it's gonna continue to stay in place and it'll be honored, but we can expect that the execution of future IGAs is gonna look different, right? The timelines are gonna be different, or the actual, yeah.
Tom, I think one of the takeaways is that there's different stages of being contractually committed. Just having an IGA, we've executed IGAs on awarded MMOF, and nothing changed with them for 5 years before any funds are truly committed to it. Having an IGA doesn't mean you're absolutely assured the funds until you say, okay, we've got through our clearances, we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed, we're ready to go. Then we execute what's called the option letter, and that truly takes funds we know we have this year and commits them to that project phase and nothing else. And those funds are very secure, so an agency should feel fairly confident they can implement, make the expenditures, and the funds are going to be there for a reimbursement. Only if things go really, really bad and the legislature takes back existing revenues, not just reduces future years' commitments, but takes back the balance of things to a size so big that we say, the conversation we'd be having at the Capitol would be really different. We'd be saying, you take this amount, and the state of Colorado is fully committed and local governments are fully obligated to these funds. And it's a big, big difference, right? Yeah. So we don't see that happening. And I say that, and if it happens, maybe I have to quit my job. But Jeff,
Yeah, I think it's well said, Michael. I mean, there's always the risk. I think that's the thing we have to recognize here, that there's no scenario where there is no risk. Right. In general, if you have an executed option letter, if you have funds encumbered in a construction phase, which is more than just having an IGA, it means that phase, has an option letter, has funds locked in for that phase. In that case, they're tied to funds that we've already received, and it is much less likely that those are clawed back, but not impossible. If you are not to that phase, if you don't have an option letter, if you don't have funds encumbered on a construction phase, then you are, there's more potential that you might be told you're going to have to wait until we get the revenue. And hopefully we get that revenue, but again, that's subject to future legislative decisions.
That's great. And Michael, thanks for adding the detail about the option letter. And obviously the details matter. And I think these are the kind of questions where everybody's going to hear from the local agencies that are, basically in this game, either have awards or have IGAs or have option letters. So I would encourage you kind of, as you come around and talk to the TPRs, MPOs, to address those details, because I think that's going to help everybody clearly understand how to evaluate their risk and when they should move a project forward, or if they should move a project forward.
And I should say, these details are in the detailed sort of guidance memo that was provided in your packet, so you have that all. So this is in there, but I did want to point out one difference. We've been talking about IGAs and option letters. Those are the contracting mechanisms used for infrastructure projects. When it comes to, let's say, transit operating or projects that are majority just purchase of materials, or buses, or planning studies, that sort of thing, we exercise or we execute grant agreements. They're a different contractual form. And when we execute a grant agreement, the funds are fully encumbered. We don't typically execute a grant agreement without encumbering the funds. It can play out that way, but we don't. So just if anybody is saying, if anybody actually has a grant agreement, a personal services grant agreement, but they're talking about an IGA and are my funds committed, you can typically say yes. Okay. Appreciate the questions. Any others before we sum up? Okay. Well, that was all I had for you today. And most of you know who I am and have known who I am, that I'm managing the program and have all along. I just wanted to mention to folks that I'm going to be starting a fairly lengthy medical leave beginning Monday. So your person to lean on for questions will be Medora Bornhoft. I think that information is provided, and you'll see it in my email signatures too. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thank you. I think with this, we just really need to try to get these projects moving forward a lot faster, and through the processes. I know it's been an issue from day one of getting the contracts done and all the oversight and those things. So it's been one of the issues from day one that all this stuff started, is we allocated lots of projects and a lot of funding that wasn't truly ready to go. And we need people to get stuff moving forward so things are being spent and getting actually on the roads or to the people. So just encourage everybody to work on streamlining the process as best we can. All right, moving on to Region 3 update.
Thank you so much. My name is Mark Rogers. Gary, can you hear me? Is my screen showing up for everybody?
Yeah, looks like it's working. So thank
All
you.
right, thank you so much, everybody. My name is Mark Rogers. I'm the Regional Planning Manager for Region 3, and I've been with CDOT now about 22 years. Enjoy the opportunity always to visit with STAC and present when I get a chance. I'm filling in for Jason Smith, our Regional Transportation Director today. I also have with me Cinnamon Levi Flynn, who will be helping me on this presentation. We're going to be talking about passing lanes, and we have a beautiful, beautiful picture of passing lanes here. And we're also going to be talking about wildlife. And again, just any opportunities we have to visit about this, we always take the opportunity. So real quick, we have to highlight that Region 3, we'll give one little slide here. The RTDs are always very competitive about what each region has to offer, right? Region 3 is the largest region in CDOT as far as square miles. We have 15 counties, over 50 municipalities, a lot of miles of highway, and a lot of mountain passes. And we'll be talking about this with our passing lanes. But first, we're going to be talking about wildlife and our success in wildlife projects and wildlife crossings. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Cinnamon to talk about this.
Great. Thank you, Mark. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Yes, so the need for wildlife vehicle collision reduction and improved safety on our roadways is important given all of the large herds of elk and mule deer here in Region 3. Many of these highways were identified in the West Slope Wildlife Prioritization Study, which was completed in 2019. But how do we implement all these different priorities? So implementation of the top 5%, which you can see some of them listed here, of these priority areas with the highest need in collision reduction will be completed first. However, that doesn't mean that the projects that fall below this aren't important. In fact, we've been working with CPW, the Wildlife Transportation Alliance, and our partners with local agencies and NGOs to meet their wildlife vehicle conflict needs in those communities. A few of these projects in the top 5% priority list have either been completed or are currently being designed. Next slide, please. State Highway 9 is a great success story on how these wildlife mitigation projects can save lives by reducing wildlife vehicle collisions by up to 92%. Unfortunately, we can't replicate these projects everywhere in the region or the state due to funding shortfalls, topography on the landscape, land ownership, or other factors, but it does give us a great model to work towards. Next slide, please. State Highway 9 and other projects across the state, as I've mentioned, were very successful at reducing collisions. They are costly to implement, and so not every location is feasible to construct these under or overpasses. So therefore, finding innovative ways to reduce these wildlife vehicle collisions is very important. For example, we have a State Highway 13 Fortification Creek project that had many constraints with topography, land ownership, which limited the construction of multiple crossings. So this project included one large arch underpass and a wildlife radar detection system to alert drivers of wildlife in the roadway. Also included alternative fence heights in key sections and Zapcrete electrified mats to prevent wildlife from entering the roadway. So research and monitoring is very important. It helps to inform the effectiveness of these different mitigation options. So for this particular project, 2-year post-construction, the underpass had an 86% success rate at passing mule deer and also a couple of elk, which is great. The radar detection system, we're studying different aspects of this, different methods to kind of, test the effectiveness of the system. One method did indicate that the lights were activated correctly 63% of the time when wildlife were documented present in the right-of-way. The researchers has set up a couple motion-triggered cameras to kind of test this and some other aspects as well. The Zapcrete mats are kind of an interesting, innovative deer guard. It uses like a small electric shock, similar to an electric fence, to deter wildlife entering the roadway. They have been very effective so far. However, they're ineffective when they're covered with sand or a lot of snow. Next slide, please. US 40 wildlife mitigation. This is another Region 3 priority. This is part of the 10-year plan and was also ranked as number 5 in the West Slope Wildlife Prioritization Study. The design for this project is 100% complete. We're beginning the right-of-way phase. However, construction funds are not yet identified. Hopefully we'll be applying for some grants in Region 3. So this project I want to highlight is a very important partnership between CDOT and CPW, as well as other stakeholders in the local area. And during design, it was important to consider some different type of structure options just to accommodate different wildlife species. So including both an overpass and some underpasses to allow movement across the highway. Next slide, please. Another project we would like to highlight, this is a phased project along State Highway 13 north of Rifle. The first phase of this project was completed in 2023. This project included one large and small arch underpass, as well as a large concrete box culvert to accommodate an array of different species. So in the first 2 years post-monitoring, multiple species were detected using these structures during that time, including mule deer, elk, moose, black bear, and some other smaller fauna. Both carcass and reported crash data have decreased approximately about 80 to 90% in this segment, but data collection and monitoring is still ongoing. And construction of future phases will be critical to kind of prevent animals from moving outside of this segment of mitigated area. So we're hoping to construct the other 2 phases very soon. Next slide, please. I-70 Vale Pass. So West Vale Pass auxiliary lanes safety improvements. Mark's going to touch on this in just a couple minutes. But this project, West Vale Pass, included some wildlife crossings to allow safe passage as part of the mitigation for that project, and those will be completed this summer. On the east side of the pass, there are currently large span bridges on the eastbound lanes, but there are none on the westbound lanes. So the East Vale Pass Wildlife Crossings Project was identified by Summit County Safe Passages and also the Wildlife Transportation Alliance as a need to reduce collisions, but also increase the habitat connectivity across the interstate to improve the safe passage for wildlife, connecting habitats that have been kind of disconnected for a while. The project is currently working towards 60% design to construct 2 underpasses and 1 overpass that will complete the entire wildlife passage system across the pass, which includes the wildlife crossings on West Vale and East Vale. No construction funds are currently identified for this East Vale Pass wildlife crossings. Next slide, please. So as Emily kindly presented earlier, on May 27th, the governor signed Senate Bill 26141, Wildlife Collision Prevention. 75% of the revenue from this fee is credited to the newly created Collision Prevention Fund, which is continuously appropriated to the CDOT Bridge Enterprise. This will help to fund safe passages for wildlife, also help to use for matching funds for grants, and also any other related administration for these efforts. We are very excited for the potential for this opportunity, which is new legislation provides, giving us funding to help many of these wildlife mitigation needs across our region and across the state. So we're looking forward to some new money to help us complete these projects. Thank you. That's all I have. Mark, I could go ahead and pass it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Cinnamon. We'll get we'll go open up for questions at the end of the slides. I wish, on her prioritization sheet at the very first, I wish it showed some of the costs that really relate to this. So yes, we do appreciate the bill that came through on that. So again, I want to talk a little bit about passing in the aux lanes. Again, the first slide we had, our cover slide, had a really pretty view of the passing lane. Didn't have any vehicles in. I don't know if it got photoshopped out or not. Here's a view of the Vale aux lanes with some vehicles. And then another view, we don't want people out taking pictures from their cars or when there's cars in the road. But again, a nice passing lane there. I want to talk a little bit about passing lanes and the need for them. So the difference real quick, passing lane and an aux lane, we'll get into when we talk about Vale Pass. But everybody understands a passing lane when they come upon it because they're going down the road, they're going with traffic, they're going the speed limit. And then all of a sudden they come upon either a truck that's going slower or a farm vehicle if you're out on the eastern slope or even on the western slope. You may have slower traffic. And this builds up what's called a speed differential or a bottleneck. And then all of a sudden you then get the turbulent traffic where you're leaning out to try and see, is there room to pass? Is there, can I go around? Then all of a sudden somebody comes up behind you and they're looking to, and so you get this turbulent back and forth traffic to find a way to get around and pass safely. So these passing lanes allow opportunities in areas to pass safely and reduce risky behavior. And so Region 3 in 2015 initiated a bottleneck study for our 2 major highways, US 50 and US 40. And a lot of this was due to the ADT and the truck percentage. We looked at various prioritizations and found several locations to prioritize where bottlenecks would just kind of start backing up. And so they looked in areas where all of a sudden you would see a group of cars following behind a slower vehicle, or the need and opportunities. And then we looked at, okay, we have these locations. Where are some opportunities for quick wins and quick projects to get done? And then we'll talk a little bit about Vale Pass and the Aux Lane. So again, the truck traffic was about 13% both on US 40 and US 50. So I absolutely love this slide. I wanted to start off with this slide depending upon time. I wish I could have done just the slide on the left-hand side first and say this is, these are typical farm to market roads sometime. This is on US 40 right outside of Krimling, just west of Krimling. And that before shot just showed really there's no room for error. If, you got a little, maybe a foot off the side of that shoulder, if you were to go off, there's a potential to overcorrect. And so it's a very narrow roadway you're looking at. Even though it's flat, you're looking at possible, distance, maybe an opportunity for a passing lane. So we went in here. This was identified as a good spot and an easy project as far as the expense, because we already had the right of way on both sides. So the picture on the right then shows after this was part of a 10-year plan project, ID number 1710, and demonstrated how, and if you look at it, it's not only is a much more up-to-date photo and a little prettier, but it feels safer. You have the shoulders there to have some opportunity if you need to get over. You also have an option to pass and to move on. So again, the visual of that, even without cars, shows how much safer it is to have that for passing. Another project. So this is a before and after on a 10-year plan project in Gunnison County. This is on US 50 around Cerro Summit, or not around Cerro Summit, around the middle bridge there on Blue Mesa. This project, again, you see a little better road. There's some opportunities there. There's a little better shoulder. But again, we're looking at the safety figures for these. With the addition of the passing lanes in both directions, you reduce the likelihood that the drivers will then take risks while passing. Again, got a shot of the passing lane being used. And again, it's not so much about travel time, but it does help mobility because there are slower vehicles out there. There are trucks that, are going a little slower. I know I had to drive a U-Haul from Alamosa to Delta when I was coming out for this job. And believe me, driving a U-Haul for somebody who doesn't drive trucks a lot, rarely, it's nice to have these passing lanes, because when you can't go with the speed of traffic, it's nice that people can get around you and go. Then your own mentality, physicality, you're not turbulent because people can get around you and not bug you. For anybody who's had that experience as far as driving trucks or driving something, you understand what I mean. You're glad that other people can get around and not try and pass you in a risky situation. Couple things about Vale Aux. We've all experienced this as well. If you travel, you have a semi driving and then another semi who's not as heavy as the other one goes around, and then you're stuck between two semis that are going a little slower than you are. With the aux lane, this allows the semis to pass one another and then another vehicle to pass them. Again, in some areas like Glenwood Canyon, we are reducing the trucks to just the far right lane. But in other areas where semis can, and legitimately when they're going up a hill, they need to keep that speed up for various reasons. This just allows a little safer opportunity to go around. Our intent on Vale Aux lanes was to build about 5 miles of lanes. I think by the time we got there, due to expense and other things, I think we were able to do about 2.7 miles total in this most recent phase on the 10-year plan. One of the things that we're working on now also is on US 40 in the next 10-year plan. We're looking at locations around between Craig and Steamboat Springs, specifically around Hayden and Milner, where we have these bottlenecks come up. This is going to be in our next 10-year plan. Part of the issue on these with this is in design, and we're looking at opportunities where we can get right away to build an opportunity for safer passing and to avoid risky behavior. Amongst all this to help is an effort to increase signage. We have found, or we're looking at Utah specifically in other areas where if you're driving along and you happen to see a truck in front of you, like, ooh, you know, am I going to have a chance or what's going to happen? You can see, okay, next passing lane is 3 miles. It's like, okay, I can wait 3 miles. Sometimes I don't have the patience, but this time I'm going to really try and just calm down, take a decent, space separation between me and the truck in front. And then you see you got a passing lane a half a mile. So then you can take that time and have a much more relaxed trip, see the scenery. And so we're really looking at this, at the implementation of this in Region 3, and just kind of help increase the safety and the driving, so to avoid more risky behavior. So we're at the questions. Is there any questions from other people from the group?
Any questions or comments? Emily?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm just curious, it says that the new law, Senate Bill, is it 141, is an optional $5 fee. Is there other projections for revenue from that for funding these projects?
Yeah, there is, and unfortunately, I don't have that number with me off the top of my head. This is all still pretty new. I think that the idea the first couple years, we're hoping to bring in a few $1,000,000. I'll just throw that out there. I don't have the exact number. I'm not sure if Emily's still on, if she may know. But yeah, I think it's supposed to bring in, a few million, at least hopefully within the first few years, or maybe even after that, as people learn about it, to help kind of fund some of these projects.
Thanks.
Okay. Don't see any other questions, so thank you for the presentation. Good information.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the statewide travel survey with Eric Sabine.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear and see me?
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you all spending a little bit of time with me this morning. We've talked about this project over the years that it's been going on, and just wanted to bring a little bit of sort of status / conclusion to you now that we are essentially done with it. Next slide, please. So probably a little bit of history for those who have not heard these presentations in the past. We started planning this project in about 2019. This type of survey, which is referred to as a household travel diary survey, is one that is commonly done by large MPOs and often done individually. We started in 2010 trying to do them more as a group in Colorado. At that time, those who are old enough remember the Great Recession. We didn't have enough money at that point to do the project throughout the state, on a statewide basis. So we ended up with enough funds to do a survey of the Front Range. So we did the 4 Front Range MPO areas at that time. I was leading that project when I was working at Dr. Cog. Fast forward to 2019, we started planning for doing a project in 2020, 2021. It's fairly typical to do these projects every decade or so. They're very arduous and very expensive. As we all know, unfortunately, COVID came along. And so we proceeded with the project, but we had to slow track it considerably due to just the reality that, as we all know, the transportation behaviors scrambled wildly in that year 2020. And so we knew we couldn't, it would be a waste of the public's funds to survey during a period when we had no idea whether travel behavior that was showing at that time was going to, have any legs and be, indicative of how people are going to travel into the future. So long story short, we went along on a slow path for the project, got to the point where we conducted the full survey essentially in the calendar year of 2024. We actually started a little bit into the winter of 2024 and then carried on to March of 2025. There were a couple of other elements of the survey. We did some additional surveying for long distance trips that people took. We also did some surveying of longer distance transit services in the state, which is very important to a lot of our sort of planning and analytical work to evaluate alternatives for transit in, let's say, the I-70 corridor or something like that. So we actually had people on board vehicles or at park and ride lots where the service was available for both the Bustang and Snowstang services and also the Winter Park Express train, and succeeded in completing a number of households on both of those services. We had, in the end, we're really pleased that we'd been targeting 20,000 completed households in the planning phase of the project. We actually ended up getting almost 21,000 households completed, and that was a little short of 50,000 people. So, a very large effort to conduct the survey. Next slide, please. A number of firsts on this project that were very exciting to us data nerds. It was, in fact, the first statewide travel survey in Colorado. We worked with all 5 of our MPO partners who all put in funds to the project, as did CDOT. It was the, sort of emphasizing the first time we've ever had data in the mountains or the Western Slope or in the Eastern Plains. All data in the past has been, in the MPOs or in the Front Range. It's the first time we've gathered weekend data. All MPO models and modeling capabilities have tended to focus on weekday travel behavior, but we are getting increasing need to evaluate weekend behaviors as well. And for, with certainty, on the I-70 corridor, for example, as we all know, the travel issues really are weekend and recreational driven. So we needed to get weekend data this time and did succeed in doing that. We used a cell phone survey app to gather some of the data for, we had a sort of a choice available to the respondents that they could use the survey app or they could just enter data into a web page, or we could, for a small number of folks, chose to be just interviewed over the phone. We gathered data on a number of modes and behaviors that didn't exist at all in 2010. E-bikes, for example, and various forms of micromobility, scooters and the like. And I think probably online shopping existed in 2010, but it was much less than it was, a decade and a half later. So we gathered a lot of data from people on the online shopping that they did that had some effect on their travel behavior. So in other words, buying stuff on the internet instead of going to the store. And likewise, other things that people can do on the internet these days, in some cases, medical appointments, education, etc. Next slide, please. I don't want to belabor this slide, but the main thing I want to note is that a large part of the expense of surveys like this one is what we refer to as controlling the sample. And that's kind of a fancy way of saying, if you just have volunteers, if you just put up a link on a website or something like that, and people just, volunteers come in and take the survey, you're almost certain to have what we call self-selection bias. So you're going to have a special group of people responding to your volunteer survey that don't necessarily properly represent the population of Colorado in this case. So I think I will leave off the rest of this slide and just go on to the next one. But I did want to note that that's a really important reality of doing surveys, that if you're, in a nutshell, if you're not doing sample control, you're not doing a real survey. And I will then get off my soapbox on that topic. Next slide, please. So just wanted to give people some results about completed survey responses across the state. These four groupings are a little bit arbitrary. They are following county boundaries. So this is Eric kind of on his own deciding what's the Front Range Mountains, Eastern Plains, and Western Slope. So just very briefly, any county that touched Utah was Western Slope in this summary. Any county that was essentially in the Front Range, meaning the MPO corridor, the I-25 corridor, counts as being in the Front Range. One example where you can get some complexities of that is Weld County. Obviously, it's a heck of a big county, and in parts of it is very much a sort of an urban corridor county, and in parts of it is very much a rural agricultural county. But since I'm just doing this along county lines, Weld County's in the Front Range. The mountains is anything between that Front Range and the counties that I defined as being the Western Slope. So, just a bit of background there. I want to call your attention not just to the completed households, where obviously as you can see, we have a lot of completed households in the Front Range. We have an awful lot of households in the Front Range, as the second column there shows, close to a little over 2 million households in the Front Range. One of the key points I want to point out is sort of illustrated in the last two columns there, where you can see essentially the percent of households that, second to last column, the percent of households that completed the survey. So, the lowest percent of households that completed the survey is the Front Range, about 0.75%. The highest percentage of households was found on the Western Slope. It's about 1.75%. Another way of looking at this is, if you look at that last column, about 1 out of 137 households in the Front Range completed the survey. On the other end of that range in the Western Slope, about 1 out of 58 households completed the survey. Next slide, please. And then a lot of what we do when we originally, we first get data from the survey is we start to just examine reasonableness of the outcomes. I will offer that I've managed a number of these surveys, and they always are really scary to me, because we are very much, kind of at the mercy of a willing and helpful public to go to a lot of trouble to fill these things out. So, as we go along, we're looking to see how reasonable the numbers are that we're getting, with, the goal that we're going to, make some adjustments if we're seeing some issues. These numbers come from the very end, after we've kind of gone through that tracking as the process, as the survey went along. And we're just looking at some super basic numbers to just see how we feel about them, and do we feel like people were completing the survey out accurately. We weren't doing things in the survey to confuse them in such a way that they wouldn't be able to respond effectively. And also looking at some of this stuff to see, as I mentioned, we've never had weekend data before, so to look at the weekend data and see what that looks like for the first time, which, if you're a data nerd like I am, is very exciting to take a look at. So very briefly, looking at this slide, there's an awful lot that you can learn from looking at this slide, but I'll call your attention to the weekend totals. This is trips per person per day on, as by day of the week. You can see that Saturday is very similar in terms of total amount of travel to the weekdays. Sunday is a bit smaller. Both of those are much what we expected to see. There's you can see, if you look at the blue color on the left, not surprisingly, there's a fair amount of trip making for work purposes on the weekdays. We expect to see that. There is trip making for work purposes on the weekends, but it is less. So you can see those smaller blue bars on Saturday and Sunday. So again, all of that was, very comforting to me, that, these numbers are looking very much like what we expected to see. So next slide, please. And then, an interesting background. As part of this project, we purchased one of these big data sources This one's called Locus, and it was a product that was produced by one of the team members of the survey team that we hired to do most of the work on the project. And you can see that just a simple number to compare the two, that the Locus number looks very similar to the household survey number in terms of just the simple number of trips per person per day. We expect the household survey to be a bit low. You know, these two data sources are completely different from one another, the way they're gathered. The household survey is this travel diary, as we've been discussing. The Locus survey comes from, you know, cell phone apps and things of that nature. But the fact that first that they look very similar to one another is very comforting to me, and that the household survey is a bit lower is not surprising, because it's just basically well known that if people are going to make a mistake in filling out their survey, the standard mistake they're going to make is to forget a few trips that they made. So if they forget a few trips they made, then you get a slightly low number, but not very much, as we can see from looking at this. Next slide, please. A bunch of numbers that, again, we could look at this in a lot of detail, but just looking at weekday trips and looking at some mode shares. If you look at the drive alone bars at the top, not surprisingly, you can see that the blue bar is weekday trips. We have a lot more drive alone on weekdays than we do on weekends. If you go down to the third set of bars there that says shared ride 3+, you can see that on weekends we have a lot more people going around in groups, 3 people or more in the car on weekends than we do on weekdays. So again, a really interesting comparison of weekdays and weekends, and is really helpful and comforting to us as far as reasonable outcomes are concerned. Next slide, please. Similar mode shares. I won't belabor this one, but you can see, like in drive alone, the blue bar at the top, there's a high percentage of drive alone for work, no big surprise. There's a very small percentage of drive alone for going to school. Again, no big surprise. So in the interest of time, I'll skip past the rest of this slide and go on to the next. The only thing I want to sort of call your attention to this one, this is looking at trips by distance. So that top bar is all the trips that are between 0 miles to 1 mile in length, and just looking at what modes do people take for those short trips versus, as you go down the slide, looking at the modes that people take for really long trips. And you can see, I'll call your attention to that purple section there, 39%. That is the walk share. Not surprisingly, there's a very big walk share on these really short trips. And as soon as you go to 1 to 2 miles and anything further than that, your walk share becomes much, much smaller. And again, that's entirely reasonable. If you look at the 50+ bar, which is the second to the bottom one, you see that sort of other category. That is almost certain to be aviation, because we don't tell people not to include trips that they took out of state. And so, for those really long trips, some of those are really, really long, and that's people flying to other states, or wherever. Next slide, please. I think I'll skip this one and the next slide. So if you could just jump past 2 slides, please. There you go. I think this is the final content slide, and just to give you a flavor of what we're doing when we're what I call controlling the sample. We are watching as the survey results come in, and we're watching to see if we are in fact getting a reasonable distribution of the kinds of households and people that are responding to the survey, and that distribution looks like what Colorado's population actually looks like too. And so this is just, we look at a bunch of different sort of slices and ways of looking at this, but household size is one. And so you can see in this case that we look pretty close to what the ACS, the census, says is the distribution of households by size in Colorado, with our survey being the sort of rust color and the blue being the ACS. So there's just one example of how we're controlling the survey so that we do in fact have an outcome that looks like Colorado. And I believe this is the last content slide, but if we jump forward, we can confirm that. Oh, no. One thing, very quickly, all 5 of the MPOs have the data for their areas now, and many, several of them are already actively working to make use of it. We are, what I regularly say is it's hard to really understand the data until you start using it in depth. So some of the MPOs are already starting to do that. What I've just shown you is a very superficial, quick look at things that gives you the impression that things looked okay and, make me happy as heck. CDOT's next big step is we are starting to work on a weekend model. We've never had one before, and our ability to support engineering and planning in the I-70 corridor particularly has been very limited as a result of not having a weekend model. So that's going to be our next project and the first thing we're going to be doing with these data. But I know the MPOs are doing all sorts of things with the data as well. And now I'm pretty sure the next slide is it, but let's jump and see. Yep, that's it. I'm done. Happy to take any questions if there's time and interest.
Yeah, I think we have time, so. I did have one question on the one that showed the splits on the over 50 miles.
Oh, yeah.
The walking looked like it jumped up.
Yeah, so we do have some walk share. That is a good question, Chair Beatty, and I don't know the answer to that one. Sometimes people do just make mistakes when they respond to the survey. So we are going to be looking into that to see if, what is the cause of having those walk trips that appear to be really long ones. And most likely we're going to be making adjustments to that because I don't believe that either.
Yeah. It was like, well, maybe you just had a large number that did long hiking trips through the mountains or something, but I just was wondering.
Yeah, I doubt that, but it's that's definitely no, I don't know. That's definitely going to be one of those ones that we're going to be looking at to see what we think of that. I don't have an answer for that at this point. Often what happens is when we dig down into it, we go, oh, that's why that happened. But at this point, I don't know the answer to it.
Just that one just popped out at me as a question.
Same here.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or input? All right, seeing none. Thank you for the presentation and glad we finally got that data. All right, we're up to the next asset management program overview with Toby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of STAC. Let me adjust my screen here so I can see the slides. Which view am I looking at? Sorry for the disruption. There we go. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of STAC. I'm Toby Manthe, Asset Management Program Manager in CDOT's Division of Transportation Development. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the key elements of our program, the purpose, the structure, and the funding. By the end of this presentation, you should have a good understanding of the role that asset management plays at CDOT. Let's go to that next slide, please. So CDOT has maintained a formal asset management program since 2012. Now, this program was created to give the department a structured, data-driven framework for managing assets and making investment decisions. You can see it right, the 12 asset classes that we coordinate. So there's pavement, bridges, culverts, traffic signals, rest areas, and many more. Our program provides the most consistent funding, but not the only funding that these asset types receive year after year. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by asset management at CDOT? First of all, we're not talking about expansion. So we're not building new roads. We're not building new bridges where nothing exists today. What we are talking about is looking at the existing transportation system. And then what we do is we fund the most cost-effective portfolio of replacements, rehabs, and even preventative work. So things like sealing bridge decks. We're not replacing the assets. We're not just replacing the assets that are in the worst condition. We're choosing the best project based on cost-benefit analysis. And the point here is to push a limited budget as far as it can go. Next slide, please. Here you can see the structure of our program. At the highest level, the Transportation Commission plays an important role by approving our asset planning budgets, our performance measures, and our policies. Next, the program strategic direction is guided by CDOT's executive team. That would be the executive director, the chief engineer, the RTDs, and others. We also have a working committee, and that comprises asset managers for each asset class. So there's a bridge asset manager, a pavement asset manager, and so on. Most of these folks are engineers who specialize in these assets and these systems. And finally, at the bottom of this slide, you see the group we brief periodically as needed. So we brief region staff, we brief our finance folks, planners, and other teams who work closely with us. Next slide, please. Requirements for our 12 asset classes are laid out in Policy Directive 1609, which the Commission adopted in 2020. So the first requirement of asset management is simple. You have to know what you're managing. So you have to know where all your noise walls are and where all your cameras are in the state. So each asset class must have an inventory. Second, each asset class needs a performance measure, a way to measure the health of both individual assets as well as the overall network. The asset classes also need a performance target for the asset class as a whole. And finally, each asset class needs to maintain a model that can both forecast future condition and can also recommend the right mix of replacements, rehabs, and preventive treatments. Let's look at our asset management process now. Next slide. Here you can see the annual cycle of the asset management program. So each year we start in steps 1 through 3. And this is when we update our inventories, assess the condition of the assets, and forecast future performance. All that work informs development of our planning budgets, which we set 4 years in advance. And those budgets come to the Transportation Commission for approval in step 4. Once those budgets are set, asset managers collaborate with regions to develop the right treatments. And a treatment would be something like a bridge replacement or a pavement rehab. And then in step 7, the regions then deliver those treatments, often as part of a larger project. Finally, all these improvements feed right back into next year's inventory and performance, which completes the cycle. And now that you know how the program works, let's look at our performance measures. So these measures are how we assess each of the 12 asset types. We use these metrics as the basis for forecasting condition and to help inform project selection. You can also see our current targets along with recent performance here. We're meeting 4 of the targets, including the bridge targets, which are some of the most significant ones. I'd say we still have gaps to close for the others, but I can say we're making progress on important ones like the percentage of poor pavement on the interstate. That second metric there has improved substantially since 2021 when it was around 3.9%. Subsequent to putting this slide together, we learned that it's 1.6% for 2025. So we're happy to see more improvement there. These targets are generally set for a 2037 horizon by the TC and are contained in Policy Directive 14 or in an appendix to that policy, depending on the metric. Next slide. So what do we do in DTD to keep this program running? Well, first off, we coordinate a budget setting workshop with our executives to determine just how to split the total asset funding across our 11 asset classes. These budget decisions are informed by asset performance and other data. We also coordinate the approval of treatment lists for each asset class, and that would be that list of preservation projects, rehabs, and replacements. The asset managers that we work with plan the treatments out 4 years in advance. And finally, another important duty that we fulfill is we meet all federal requirements for asset management. For example, we are required to maintain asset models and to develop a transportation asset management plan for pavement and bridges. Let's take a look at that plan now. So every state DOT is required by federal statute to produce an asset management plan every 4 years. Our next plan is due in March of 2027. And these plans do a lot. They show our performance targets, they forecast future condition. They also describe our processes and funding needs, and they identify risk. Finally, they outline how assets are treated throughout their life cycles. CDOT's plan goes beyond the federal requirements, which only cover pavement and bridges. Our plan includes all 12 of the asset classes I mentioned previously. This plan is very easy for you to find online. Just Google CDOT Asset Management Plan. While it's 300 pages, the plan is built in a modular, intuitive fashion. So let's say your passion is tunnels or rest areas. You can easily look up a 15-page booklet on that asset class in the appendix. Next slide, please. The total asset management budget is about $870 million per year, and that's when you include the bridge and tunnel enterprise. It's important to note that about 89% of the asset funding is concentrated in our big three asset classes, and that would be maintenance, pavement, and bridges. 9 of our asset class, so things like traffic signals, rest areas, and our heavy fleet class, receive just 11% of that budget. Next slide, please. This slide just gives more detail on that breakdown by asset types. I'm not going to go through every single asset class and what it receives, but we've separated out in that green space at the bottom right, the bridge and tunnel enterprise and the maintenance budget, because those are set outside the asset management budget setting process, but they do represent a significant chunk of that total asset funding. We just set budgets last year for FY30, and most of the assets will receive a 6% increase that year and a 2.3% increase the following year. Next slide, please. Because the funding dedicated to our program isn't always sufficient to meet our goals, there are other sources of asset funding throughout the department, including CDOT's 10-year plan. In addition, the Commission has in recent years provided significant ad hoc supplemental funding to help address urgent needs and reduce the backlog of assets in poor condition. Here you can see some examples of those one-time increases. For example, there was a 10 million boost for rest areas in 2024. For pavement, there have also been several rounds of ad hoc funding aimed at reducing the backlog of interstate pavement rated poor. Most recently, the TC in November 2025 approved $80 million in additional pavement investment to reduce the percentage of low drivability life roads. And there's a focus there on non-interstate roads with low drivability life. Next slide, please. Besides asset management, of course, CDOT's other big funding program is the 10-year plan. While there is some overlap, we wanted to clarify the different roles that the two programs play in funding our assets. So the main asset management program, which I've been discussing at left, strives to fund projects that preserve and extend asset life through maintenance, lower cost preservation treatments, rehabs, and so on. And of course, we do replacements as well. However, because we've lacked the funding to meet our performance targets, a backlog of assets in poor condition has grown. And that's where that 10-year plan is helping out. It's addressing some of the worst of our backlog through efforts such as the Rural Roads Program and other pavement projects. Additionally, the plan does fund projects with wider aims than asset condition. For example, it pays for intersections that promote mobility and safety. And finally, the 10-year plan does pay for expanding the system in some cases, which is explicitly not the focus of the TAM program. Next slide, please. And that is our presentation for today. Hopefully it gave you a good background on how the asset management program works in the department. I'll hand it back over to the chair right now and take any questions you may have.
Yeah, anybody have any questions or comments? Kristen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think it's really, I think this is a program that a lot of people don't really understand. And, you know, we hear from people all over, from elected officials around concerns around the, you know, state of roads. And I know that the CDOT has a plan, and I know that there's limited funds for this. I know more funds have been secured, which is good. And it still feels like people are very concerned about this issue. So I think the more we can get this out, that there is a plan, that this is how we do it is really good. One of the questions that I have is around when you're doing the inventory and assessing the conditions, do you talk to local folks? Are you in contact with local officials, helping them, you know, kind of do they help you identify those at all? Do they kind of talk about areas that their community is concerned about? I just wonder how much input local government officials and residents have in sort of inventorying and IDing these spaces that really need some of this work done?
Yeah, so we have a very automated system and scientific way of inventorying the roads through vans that drive away with very carefully calibrated lasers and other equipments. In addition, I know that the regions are constantly taking feedback from those local officials. I do have the pavement program manager on the call if he has any more insight to how we might incorporate local feedback to our pavement inventory.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. So I'm Craig Whedon. I'm the pavements asset manager for CDOT. I don't have a whole lot else to add other than what Toby said. You know, from the data collection and the inventory process, as Toby stated, we do contract with vendors that use standard AASHTO data collection techniques to collect the information and the distresses on our roadways. That goes into our pavement management program, where the conversations with the locals would be had at related to problematic areas in their regions would be the region personnel as they're generating their treatment list.
So that's good. So that's, you know, we can tell people if they have concerns that they can talk to their local CDOT folks. That I guess I just, you know, I do understand, you know, wanting to have a scientific and data informed approach to this. And I also hear from a lot of local officials, especially in rural areas, that, you know, of some real concerns. And I think involving some people in the process is a really important piece so that people feel like they're being heard about some of these roads, because, you know, that's why there's, you know, ballot measures like 175 and other things that come up, is that there's definitely some disconnect, I think, around this. And so just, I guess I would just encourage folks and maybe, you know, talk to the local CDOT folks of really trying to work with the community so there isn't that disconnect. And so we understand kind of when you'll be working on some of these problematic roads and how we can sort of work together to make that happen. I just, there again, I think that this is a really important discussion, and it is where I have a lot of people. I belong to, you know, a county, you know, association, CCI, for example, hear all the time about how the roads need work. And, you know, even if I kind of show them, you know, a slide deck like this, there's still frustration, I think, out there. And I just want to figure out ways that we can kind of work together to maybe have better communication in this space. And so I guess just, you know, no question here, really just kind of throwing that out there of, you know, how can we maybe bridge the gap around some of these conversations that are being had, and have people understand there is a plan, there's limited dollars, and how can you work with local communities to address some of the really crucial needs that they're seeing. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? I do have one. I know a lot of this is looking at, you know, the sensors and things you use to detect road conditions. Is there any data or analysis on the age of some of the infrastructure? Because a lot of what was called the seventh pot that was invested in the 90s, and a lot of the construction on a lot of the interstate T-Rex projects, a lot of big projects throughout the state, a lot of those are already coming up on 30 years age of the first phases of those were being built. And I know out here on I-70 and some of those we're starting to see that aging fatigue and things are starting to show up. They're minor at this point, so they probably don't pick up a lot on some of the sensor things that are being used. But within 5 to 10 years, a lot of those are going to really start expanding and start seeing that deterioration. So is there some look at the age of some of the infrastructure, especially the interstates and some of the major freight corridors, and planning for needing rehab or major surface treatments to address that aging coming in the next 10 to 20 years, and how we are going to address those in addition to all the other roads that have been needing work, and how we're going to meet that future need. I think that's an analysis CDOT really should look at trying to do, so that we can communicate to the public that we need this additional funding somehow to meet these growing needs that are coming up because of past investments that are aging out. It's a piece of information I think CDOT really needs to try to gather and get into this sort of a plan, and so that we know kind of the upcoming shortfall that is going to be coming.
Yeah, we do have asset models that look at that deterioration that you mentioned. So what's happening in the next 10 or 20 years and what's recommended by those models for those locations that are aging. In terms of looking at meeting the needs, we typically do produce an estimate in our asset management plan. We are working on that currently right now, and we'll have that plan ready in March of 2027. Part of the difficulty in producing a quick estimate is those 10-year plan projects, because the pavement investments are part of a larger project, and we're currently extracting which part of those projects are related to pavement investments, so the model can incorporate that work that we're planning as well. But certainly we carefully look at how the pavement is deteriorating and what projects are recommended for those locations.
I'm glad to see that we are finally starting to get some inflationary amounts into some of the maintenance and preservation line items in the budget. It's still not enough, but at least there is some in there. I think we need to get somewhere around 6% to try to match construction cost factors rather than just flat inflation numbers, because construction tends to run at a higher inflation rate than the general economy. But I am glad we're at least seeing a little bit, but we need a good base funding increase. So, all right, any other questions on the asset management plan? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you for the good presentation.
Thank you.
Good background for everyone. All right, I think that brings us up to our last item, which is July 2nd meeting. We're thinking we'll cancel that meeting, but if there is somebody that has a burning need that we still need to have that meeting, we can still try to schedule something. So absent of hearing a need for it, we'll just plan to cancel our July meeting. So, okay. Any other business comments, input for STAC, or things for me to take to commission this month? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll all see you in August for our next STAC meeting. So, thank you.